The world is changing at unparalleled pace. We are facing increasing pressure from global challenges such as the climate change, food security, and COVID-19 pandemic. Despite these challenges, our world has made great strides in advancing growth. Digitalization, for example, helped micro and small enterprises across the globe build capabilities and increase market access. An unprecedented global collaboration led to a vaccine rolled out that has vaccinated over 60% of the world's population in less than 2 years. The global economy is recovering, and this is our chance to shape a better future for our planet and our people. The B20 is providing the platform to make this happen.
Since its establishment in 2010, the Business 20 or B20 has served as the voice of the business community in the G20 forum. Together, B20 participants are committed to making impact in the world, forcing out their ideas to push private-led economic transformation forward.
B20 business leaders are the front runners in working to solve the biggest global challenges, such as spearheading green transformation, promoting trade and investment, developing infrastructures, leading digital innovation, and advancing equality.
As business leaders in the group of 20, the future relies on you to find lasting solutions to our current global challenges and pave the way forward.
This year, Indonesia is honored to be the host of the G20 and B20 summits. As the fourth largest nation, the biggest economy in Southeast Asia, and one of the world's most prominent emerging markets, Indonesia is home to 270 million consumers, 63 million MSMEs, and 12 tech unicorns. Boasting rapid digital growth and emerging sustainable development, Indonesia truly is a land of opportunities. Under this year's theme of advancing innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth, the B20 stands ready to promote dialogue among business players in G20 countries, provide policy recommendations, and launch initiatives on issues that matter. The themes are aligned with the key messages from inception meeting.
Berharap komunitas B20 akan memberikan tawaran-tawaran konkret yang bisa menjadi bagian dari capaian konkret KTT G20.
And the leadership of governments like Indonesia is going to be absolutely essential in this decisive decade of our climate fight.
It's a great example of how businesses and governments can work together. The B20 plays an important role in spurring more of these collaborations.
The B20 has established several task forces to push progress forward and ensure that we will create recommendations that are actionable, sustainable, and inclusive. These task forces will represent the business community and advocate policy recommendations to the government. In this B20 presidency, we are committed to creating legacy programs that lay foundation for positive, lasting impact across G20 countries, marked by big new ideas, international collaboration, and tangible as well as sustainable impact, prototype in Indonesia and to be scaled globally.
You too can be a part of this movement and make your mark on the future of business and the global economy through our B20 Indonesia. By participating in our legacy programs and B20 events, you will shape strategic moves, making meaningful connections, and collaborate to build a stronger economy together.
We welcome you to become a part of our journey toward a better tomorrow.
Saya menyampaikan selamat kepada Italia yang telah sukses menjalankan presidensi G20 di tahun 2021. Dan Indonesia merasa terhormat untuk meneruskan presidensi G20 tahun 2022. Kami akan menjamu Yang Mulia dan Bapak Ibu di hamparan pantai Bali yang indah, yang menginspirasi gagasan-gagasan inovatif untuk produktivitas G20 ke depan. Sampai bertemu di Indonesia, terima kasih.
Halo, selamat pagi teman kumparan semuanya. Ini merupakan hari kedua dari B20 Summit Indonesia, di mana kumparan.com masih akan melaporkan bagaimana jalannya perhelatan B20 Summit Indonesia di hari kedua, dan juga bagaimana perhelatan acara puncak KTT G20 yang juga akan diselenggarakan selama 2 hari di Nusa Dua Bali pada tanggal 15 sampai 16 November 2022. Dan saya tidak sendirian karena ada rekan-rekan jurnalis lainnya yang sudah tersebar di beberapa titik yang akan melaporkan bagaimana situasi dan kondisi dari jalannya acara baik B20 Summit maupun acara KTT G20. Nah, diketahui teman kumparan, di sekitar area Nusa Dua Bali ini memang sudah dipenuhi dengan awak media, kemudian dengan para delegasi dan perwakilan negara anggota G20 yang sudah datang dan tiba di Bali, di mana para kepala negara juga mulai berdatangan sejak Minggu malam, sejak kemarin, seperti Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden yang juga sudah tiba di Bali pada Minggu 13 November malam, tiba menggunakan Air Force One dan mendarat di Bandara I Gusti Ngurah Rai Bali. Mungkin kita bisa menyaksikan bagaimana situasi atau suasana ketika Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden ini mendarat di Bali untuk menghadiri KTT G20 yang akan diselenggarakan pada tanggal 15 sampai 16 November 2022. Menggunakan pesawat Air Force One, Presiden Joe Biden ini kemudian disambut dengan para penari Bali yang sudah bersiap ketika Joe Biden ini turun dari Air Force One. Dan para penari Bali ini juga bukan hanya menyambut Joe Biden saja, tapi juga menyambut perwakilan dari kepala negara maupun delegasi yang tiba di Bandara I Gusti Ngurah Rai Bali. Baik, ini merupakan suasana kedatangan Joe Biden ketika mendarat di Bali dan disambut dengan tarian tradisional Bali. Ini sekaligus untuk memperkenalkan juga kepada para kepala negara, begitu ya, bagaimana keunikan dan bagaimana keindahan dari budaya Bali di Indonesia. Selain Joe Biden, kepala negara lainnya juga sudah tiba di Bali, seperti Menlu Rusia yang juga sudah tiba di Bali pada Minggu malam, Menteri Luar Negeri Rusia Sergei Lavrov yang tiba dan disambut oleh Menteri BUMN Republik Indonesia Erick Thohir juga sudah mendarat malam tadi di Bali, Indonesia untuk mengikuti gelaran KTT G20. Ini merupakan situasi atau suasana malam tadi ketika tim dari Indonesia ini menyambut kedatangan dari Menteri Luar Negeri Sergei Lavrov. Dan selanjutnya teman kumparan, sudah ada kepala negara dan juga perwakilan dari negara-negara anggota G20 lainnya yang juga sudah tiba di Indonesia, seperti Menteri Luar Negeri Meksiko, kemudian juga Presiden Komisi Eropa, Presiden Republik Korea yang juga sudah tiba malam tadi, kemudian ada Perdana Menteri Fiji juga dan Perdana Menteri Jepang yang dilaporkan sudah mendarat dengan selamat di Bali untuk mengikuti KTT G20 pada besok hari dan lusa, hari pertama dan kedua acara puncak dari G20. Baik, ini menandakan bahwa jelang acara puncak ini para delegasi dan juga kepala negara dari negara-negara anggota G20 ini bersiap begitu ya, tiba 1 hari sebelum atau 2 hari sebelum agar benar-benar bisa menghadiri KTT G20 ini dengan situasi yang kondusif. Baik, saya akan bertanya kepada rekan-rekan jurnalis lainnya yang juga sudah tersebar di beberapa titik. Ada rekan saya Nica, kemudian ada Jemima, dan juga ada Alia. Halo, selamat pagi, girls.
Hai, pagi Melisa.
Pagi, baik.
Pagi Melisa.
Pagi. Saya akan menyapa Nica terlebih dulu. Nica, dikabarkan infonya Presiden Republik Indonesia Joko Widodo ini juga sudah berada di Bali untuk menghadiri beberapa agenda sebelum acara puncak KTT G20 besok. Boleh dilaporkan apa saja agenda Presiden Joko Widodo hari ini, Nica?
Baik, terima kasih Melisa dan juga selamat pagi teman kumparan. Saat ini saya berada di Grand Hyatt Nusa Dua Bali. Akan dilakukan kerjasama konektivitas sistem pembayaran atau Regional Payment Connectivity. Ini merupakan inisiasi dari Bank Indonesia yang nantinya akan kerjasama sebagai bentuk sistem pembayaran seperti itu di 5 negara ASEAN seperti Indonesia, ada juga nanti kerjasama dengan Bank Sentral Filipina, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapura, dan termasuk dengan Thailand juga seperti itu. Dan di acara saat ini nantinya juga akan dihadiri oleh Presiden Jokowi, Gubernur Bank Indonesia, Pak Peri Warjio, dan juga ada Menteri Keuangan Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Seperti itu, Melisa.
Baik, saat ini untuk situasi dan kondisi di Grand Hyatt Bali seperti apa nih, Ca? Menyambut kedatangan dari Presiden Joko Widodo yang hari ini menghadiri agenda dari Bank Indonesia.
Ya, saat ini sudah hadir beberapa delegasi juga dari perwakilan Bank Sentral dari 5 negara tersebut. Situasi saat ini juga cukup ramai karena kita juga tengah menanti Presiden Jokowi. Seperti itu, Melisa.
Baik, terima kasih Nica. Kami akan terus mengupdate bagaimana situasi di sana. Saya akan berpindah ke rekan saya, ada Alia Bunga, yang langsung melaporkan dari venue B20 Summit Indonesia. Baik Alia, bagaimana situasi dan kondisi yang ada di venue utama B20 dan apa saja agenda yang akan dilakukan hari ini?
Baik, Melisa, terima kasih dan selamat pagi teman kumparan dari Bali. Hari ini hari kedua dari B20 Forum dan antusiasmenya masih terasa sampai sekarang. Di belakang saya masih banyak orang-orang mancanegara dari dalam negeri, berbagai delegasi juga masih lalu lalang. Dan tepat di belakang saya ini juga ada pintu di mana para menteri, delegasi, dan bisnis internasional juga akan masuk ke tempat di mana main hall yang terjadi si forum diskusi ini. Nah, untuk hari ini tamunya lebih menarik, teman kumparan, karena hari ini tuh ada kehadiran dari secara virtual ya, ada Anne Hathaway dan Elon Musk. Gitu. Cuman sebelumnya saya ingin membacakan sendiri terlebih dahulu ya pajamat yang pertama-tama akan dilakukan. Yang pertama itu saat ini tengah pembukaan acara puncak B20 dan selanjutnya nanti akan ada keynote speech dari Chairwoman B20 Shinta Kamdani, disusul dengan Ketua Kamar Dagang dan Industri Indonesia Arsyad Rashid. Nah, tadi sekitar pukul 9:10 WITA, di belakang saya melihat sudah ada Menteri Perekonomian Erlangga Hartarto bersama dengan Arsyad Rashid sempat berfoto di belakang saya sini. Lalu mereka sudah ruangan main hall dan ini menandakan bahwa forum telah berlangsung dan sekitar pukul 9:30 WITA nantinya akan memasuki panel ke-8. Jadi teman kumparan, selama B20 ini terdapat 14 panel discussion. Kemarin kita sudah melalui 6 panel discussion dan hari ini ada 7. Sementara itu di hari ini temanya membahas tentang inovasi dan digitalisasi juga. Pada itu di sekitar pukul 9:30 WITA nanti ada sambutan dari pendiri Forum Ekonomi Dunia oleh Klaus Schwab dan selanjutnya ada CEO Grab, Anthony Tan juga hadir di sini. Lalu ada juga dari eksekutif Chairman Amazon, Jeff Bezos juga berpartisipasi secara langsung. Cuman saya belum melihat kehadirannya Bapak Bezos di sini, mungkin bahkan menyusul. Kenapa sangat ramai di sini? Karena teman kumparan ada sekitar 40 negara yang berpartisipasi. Di sini akan dilahirkan, hopefully, kita harapkan akan melahirkan berbagai MOU dan kerjasama baru berluasan dengan Indonesia juga dengan negara-negara berkembang lainnya untuk memulihkan ekonomi pasca pandemi. Begitu, Melisa.
Baik, tadi ada beberapa nama yang menarik begitu yang akan hadir di sini, juga dikabarkan ada Menko Perekonomian Airlangga Hartarto dan juga ada Jeff Bezos tadi dari Amazon yang dikabarkan juga akan menghadiri hari kedua B20 Summit Indonesia ini. Kemudian ada Anne Hathaway meskipun akan hadir secara virtual yang sebelumnya disangka begitu ya akan hadir langsung in person di Bali, namun dikabarkan akan hadir secara virtual begitu ya, Alia. Baik, untuk panel diskusi hari ini mungkin ada highlight yang paling menarik yang memang benar-benar ditunggu begitu pembahasannya di hari ini, itu apa saja, Alia?
Yang menarik itu ada pemaparan juga dari Bapak Airlangga Hartarto dan Menteri BUMN Erick Thohir. Kedua menteri nantinya akan menjabarkan tentang kemitraan sektor publik serta dalam negeri dalam untuk memulihkan ekonomi. Mohon maaf. Di sini seperti yang paling ditunggu nih ya, Melisa. Kalau saya lihat antusiasmenya itu adalah pemaparan dari Elon Musk. Karena Elon Musk kan tadinya pengen datang ke Indonesia, tetapi batal akibat ada urusan dengan Twitter. Jadi Elon Musk akan hadir secara virtual, itu menurut saya yang bakal segera ditunggu. Mengingat Indonesia sepertinya memiliki keinginan untuk bekerja sama dengan Tesla, begitu.
Baik. Terima kasih Alia Bunga melaporkan langsung dari venue atau main hall utama B20 Summit Indonesia. Kami akan kembali lagi ke Alia. Saya akan pindah dulu move kepada Jemima. Baik, bagaimana situasi dan kondisi di sekitar area Nusa Dua Bali ini pada hari kedua, dan mungkin kalau kita bisa flashback sedikit hal yang menarik begitu ya dari panel diskusi kemarin di hari pertama B20 Summit itu apa saja, Jemima?
Ya, baik Melisa, terima kasih. Selamat pagi kepada teman-teman kumparan juga. Saya Jemima, saya melaporkan langsung dari kawasan Nusa Dua. Kalau saya lihat dari pantauan terkini, saya melihat bahwa antusiasmenya masih sangat tinggi seperti kemarin. Sejak pukul 7.30 saya di sini, saya sudah melihat banyak sekali delegasi dari berbagai negara, tidak hanya dari Indonesia, dan juga teman-teman awak media yang mulai berdatangan. Nah, mereka ini datang menggunakan kendaraan pribadi, ada yang menggunakan shuttle yang disediakan di kawasan Nusa Dua, ada pula yang menggunakan mobil listrik seperti Wuling dan Toyota, dan ada juga menggunakan motor listrik. Nah, kemudian menurut pantauan saya sejauh ini saya melihat bahwa situasinya ramai, tetapi masih kondusif. Karena pengamanannya pun ketat, sampai sekarang masih berlanjut pengamanannya. Bahkan ketika kami masuk ke dalam venue ini, kami dipastikan sudah melakukan swab antigen. Ketika kami belum melakukan swab antigen, kami harus mendapatkan swab terlebih dahulu. Nah, begitu. Jadi sejauh ini saya lihat bahwa situasinya ya aman, tidak ada masalah, masih berjalan lancar. Begitu. Mungkin sekarang saya akan flashback dulu kepada hari kemarin. Mungkin ada beberapa teman kumparan yang baru masuk dengan live streaming ini. Mungkin beberapa yang tidak tuning in ke YouTube kami, jadi tidak tahu apa yang sedang terjadi. Nah, selama 2 hari ini, dari kemarin hingga sekarang ini adalah B20 Summit Indonesia Opening Day. Jadi opening day pertama dan opening day kedua. Nah, opening day pertama ini bisa dibilang itu setting the stage untuk panel-panel discussions untuk sesi-sesi berikutnya. Jadi memberikan landasan apa aja yang dibahas. Nah, kemarin itu ada welcoming address dari Ketua Forum B20, Shinta Kamdani. Kemudian ada welcome address juga dari Ketua Kamar Dagang dan Industri Indonesia atau Kadin Indonesia, Arsyad Rashid. Nah, setelah itu diikuti oleh Summit Ministerial Talk atau pembicaraan menteri. Temanya adalah menyelaraskan peran komunitas bisnis dengan prioritas G20. Kemudian dilanjut lagi dengan summit panel discussion dengan tema manajemen sumber daya berkelanjutan untuk pertumbuhan ekonomi. Dilanjut kembali oleh summit panel session dengan tema mewujudkan rekomendasi dan prioritas G20. Kemudian dilanjutkan lagi dengan summit session ini untuk merayakan pencapaian dan hasil-hasil dari pertemuan B20 ini yang dilangsungkan sejak awal tahun kemarin ya, ketika kita mengambil alih keketuaan atau presidensi G20 pada akhir 2021. Nah, kemudian dilanjut lagi dengan Summit Dialog dengan tema investasi dalam green ventures untuk pertumbuhan berkelanjutan. Kemudian terakhir ada Summit Dialog tentang menciptakan ekonomi yang tangguh untuk berkelanjutan melalui investasi. Nah, kemudian apakah hasil dari pertemuan-pertemuan B20 ini sepanjang tahun ini? Jadi mungkin teman-teman yang belum mengetahui bahwa B20 ini adalah business outreach dari G20. Jadi ini merupakan bagian dari G20, tapi fokusnya terhadap komunitas bisnis global. Dan karena fokusnya terhadap komunitas bisnis global, ini mencakup lebih dari 2.000 delegasi dari seluruh dunia yang termasuk kepala negara, CEO, pemimpin perusahaan global, dan pemangku kepentingan lainnya. Mereka datang dari 69 negara di dunia. Kemudian ada pula 100 pembicara dari 30 negara yang berbeda. Nah, angka-angka ini menjadi rekor baru sepanjang sejarah B20 sejak dulu. Begitu. Nah, dari pertemuan-pertemuan ini apakah hasilnya? Hasilnya itu ada 3 bentuk. Yang pertama adalah rekomendasi kebijakan, yang kedua adalah policy action, dan yang ketiga itu adalah legacy program. Nah, semua rekomendasi, semua policy action dan legacy program ini mengikuti isu prioritas utama dari G20. Ada 3 hal, yaitu kesehatan global, transformasi digital, dan transisi energi. Nah, untuk mencapai hasil-hasil ini, B20 sendiri sudah membentuk 6 task force dan 1 action council. Nah, dari task force dan action council ini sendiri bahkan sudah ada 1.200 anggota dari 15 sektor industri berbeda. Nah, kemudian hasilnya adalah 25 kebijakan, rekomendasi kebijakan serta 68 policy action. Nah, policy action dan rekomendasi kebijakan ini di dalamnya ada 3 visi utama yang diangkat oleh Presidensi Indonesia, yaitu inovatif, inklusif, dan kolaboratif, alias inovatif, inklusif, dan kolaboratif. Nah, kenapa seperti itu? Mungkin saya bisa elaborasikan dulu ya. Jadi, kenapa Indonesia itu mengambil 3 visi utama ini? Itu karena mungkin teman-teman sendiri sudah tahu ya, ketika pandemi COVID-19 ini menghantam dunia, transformasi digital itu berlangsung dengan jauh lebih cepat lagi, dengan rapid. Tapi sayangnya ada beberapa kelompok rentan terutama yang tidak bisa mendapatkan manfaat ataupun kesempatan dari transformasi digital ini. Nah, untuk itulah kita menekankan pada pada 3 misi ini, yaitu inovatif, inklusif, dan kolaboratif. Bagaimana kita bisa membuat inovasi supaya kita bisa merangkul kelompok-kelompok rentan pula. Nah, ketika kita membicarakan kolaboratif, kita tidak hanya bekerja sama dengan pemangku kepentingan tertentu, tapi kita juga merangkul bisnis small, medium, dan juga kelompok-kelompok rentan seperti perempuan, seperti itu. Begitu,
Baik. Terima kasih Jemima. Wah, ini flashback yang menarik sekali ya dari apa yang sudah terjadi di hari pertama B20 Summit Indonesia. Dan terima kasih untuk Richa, untuk Alia, dan juga untuk Jemima tentunya. Di hari ini kami akan terus melaporkan dan melakukan live streaming kepada teman kumparan semuanya bersama dengan rekan-rekan jurnalis kumparan yang sudah tersebar di beberapa titik di daerah atau di area Nusa Dua Bali ini. Terima kasih banyak teman-teman rekan-rekan jurnalis kumparan yang lainnya. Baik, dan saat ini kalau kita melihat situasi di dalam venue utama atau di main hall, tadi itu sudah ada welcome message dari Chair of B20 Indonesia, yaitu Sinta Kamdani. Kemudian juga tadi ada opening message dari Ketua Kadin Arsyad Rashid, dan di dalam agenda atau rundown yang diberikan kepada awak media, setelah ini akan ada summit keynote speech dari Menko Perekonomian Airlangga Hartarto. Langsung saja kita simak.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable Pak Arsyad Rashid, Head of Indonesia Chambers and Commerce, Honorable Ibu Sinta Wijaya Kamdani, Chair of B20 Indonesia, Excellencies, Professor Klaus Schwab from World Economic Forum, Excellencies, Ibu Mutia Hafiz, Chair of Foreign Affairs and Security Commission, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you here today to the B20 Summit. The world is facing historical change. We are in the midst of transforming from one system to another, which is key to addressing staggering and stubborn inflation and harnessing the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolutions, artificial intelligence, and innovation. This transformation can benefit all of us. Government must be at the driver's seat in responding to the future challenge through stronger public-private partnership for concrete policy actions. The B20, encompassing more than 41 countries, recognize the importance of inclusive economy with focus on micro and small medium enterprises and women participation this year. Women, the unbanked population, and the poor must be equally represented in the future business ecosystem, all of them called the bottom pyramid. Ladies and gentlemen, partnership between the public and private sector is the key to the post-pandemic economic architecture. With this partnership, we expect that Indonesia economy to grow at 5.4% in 2022, substantially higher than the initial forecast by the global organization. And in this third quarter this year, we even grow at 5.72% on year. Much of this growth comes from sectors that have bounced back well now that the COVID-19 pandemic is under better control. More recently, the generators of our economic recovery are the air travel, transportation and storage, accommodation, food and beverage, and machinery manufacturing. They are all provide jobs to many workers and benefit even more people through strong value chain. This kind of partnership should harness the benefit of innovations and the fourth industrial revolutions and serve as a common denominator for addressing food security, energy security, and today, with adoption of technology and strong R&D, businesses are more efficient and recording higher productivity. Transformational business must also encapsulate sustainability by accounting for environmental, social, and governance or ESG practices. This approach is adopted in our plan to build the new capital in East Kalimantan, Nusantara, that will incorporate sustainability, smart mobility, smart cities, quality infrastructures, and human capital developments. Opportunity must be abound for our children and our great-grandchildren. We have succeeded in the past through green revolutions, avoiding hunger and poverty through innovation in agricultural productions. Toward the future, we must be prepared for another green revolution, innovating for a more major transformation toward digital economy that protects our planet and our future. We invite you to be part of Indonesia transformation. Business leader, speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia is taking action to address high inflation through financial and structural reform. With that strategy, we are taking robust action to strengthen the value chain, particularly on critical minerals, which are central in developing an ecosystem of electric vehicle and automotive. To adapt to the future of work and creating new opportunities to those affected technological and pandemic disruption, we have developed an online vocational education system through the Kartu Prakerja or pre-employment card. The objective is to reskill, upskill, and improve digital literacy while at the same time enhancing financial inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, let me underline one thing. The ability of the government to resolve the crisis is not unilateral. The business sector is also key to that endeavor. There is an old saying that underlies Indonesia work culture. Bersatu kita teguh, bercerai kita runtuh, which has a meaning, united we stand, divided we fall. Therefore, with this spirit, I ask all of you, let us unite together in facing problems and challenges that we face now. Let's find amicable solution to all of us. I believe we shall overcome those challenges. With Indonesia, let's recover together and recover stronger. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. United we stand, divided we fall. A very strong message by Mr. Airlangga Hartarto. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our opening addresses. We now proceed to insightful panel sessions for you to listen to and also to follow.
Teman kumparan, itu tadi merupakan keynote speech dari Menko Perekonomian Airlangga Hartarto, di mana Airlangga Hartarto tadi sempat menyebut soal bagaimana kemitraan swasta dan juga antara kemitraan swasta dan juga negara ini penting untuk perjalanan atau perkembangan ekonomi di negara tersebut, dan juga bagaimana Airlangga tadi mengajak para anggota G20 ini untuk bisa sesuai dengan tema yang diangkat dalam KTT G20, ya recover stronger dan juga recover together, keluar bersama-sama dari pandemi COVID-19. Yang kita ketahui juga ya, pada KTT G20 ini ada beberapa hal penting yang dibahas atau menjadi pembahasan utama begitu ya, seperti soal pandemi COVID-19, soal climate change, dan juga soal global economy, situasi global economy yang saat ini terjadi, bagaimana perhatian dan apa saja antisipasi yang harus dilakukan oleh negara-negara anggota G20. Baik, kita akan langsung menyimak bagaimana jalannya agenda atau panel diskusi dari Main Hall B20 Summit Indonesia. Langsung saja kita simak bersama teman kumparan.
For the quality of the preparation of this B20 meeting. It reminds me, actually, in 2010, I proposed to the chair of the G20 at that time, the Korean chairmanship, to integrate a strong business dimension into the deliberations of the G20, because I deeply believe into the multi-stakeholder concept, which means we all have to work together. Corporations, of course, governments, civil society, to address the big issues in our world. Let me just make 4 remarks related to generating growth through innovation. First, of course, if you look at all the challenges, we can speak about the multi-crisis, an economic, a political, a social, an ecological, an institutional crisis. But actually, what we have to confront is a deep, systemic, and structural restructuring of our world. And this will take some time. And the world will look differently after we have gone through this transition process. Politically, The driving forces for this political transformation, of course, is the transition into a multipolar world, which has a tendency to make our world much more fragmented. And for these reasons, events like this one, the G20, and so on, are the very important connectors to avoid a too great segmentation, I would say, blockization instead of globalization of our world. If you look at the economic transformation forces, I just would like to mention four. The energy transition which we need, and where Indonesia is playing a very important role. Second, the reshaping of our supply chains, where Indonesia can play a very important role. Then I would also say the integration of external costs. Just look at plastics. 10 billion tons a year of plastics are moving into our oceans. And for this reason, I'm so pleased that on the occasion of this G20, B20 meeting, we can announce and inaugurate an O20 to take better care of our oceans. But in addition to the reshaping of our supply chains, of the energy transformation, of internalization of external costs, we also see the consequences of militarization of our economies. Now, this all means, at least at the beginning, a cost burden. Now, if you restructure a company, you write off the costs, and of course, the shareholders are suffering. If you restructure an economy, the result is a reduction of income, of disposable income, which can lead to extensive social tensions, which we see in our world developing now. How do we deal with this transition, which may last for several years? Not just applying crisis management, not just reacting, but constructing the future with a purpose. We should use this transition time with a clear concept of what we want to achieve, how we want to come out of this transition time. We want to come out as a more sustainable, more resilient, and more inclusive world. Now, my second point relates to the fourth industrial revolution the minister mentioned. When I wrote the book about the fourth industrial revolution and conceptualized the idea of this revolution, I described 23 technologies. And at that time, only 5 years ago, many of those technologies were considered science fiction. Today, they all have become realities, and new technologies we have to deal with. Quantum technology, the metaverse, and I'm very proud that Indonesia is again one of the countries which wants to ride at the forefront of those developments of the fourth industrial revolution. What makes the fourth industrial revolution different? Three things. First, it's the scope. Contrary to earlier technological innovation, it doesn't deal with one or two innovations. It's a whole panoply of technologies which interact and which completely will change how we produce, how we consume, how we communicate. But the second element is the speed. And if you look at technological revolutions, it usually goes in the form of an S-curve. And just now, we are at the inflection point to exponential development. And technology will change completely what we are doing at this present time. And not only what we are doing, and that's another change, it will change and it will have an impact on even who we are. Just look how even the internet has changed to a certain extent our identities over the last 20 years. I'm very proud that the forum is also at the forefront of those new technologies, and we will showcase, even here in the context of our presentation of the Ocean 20 initiative, how you can use the metaverse in order to create much deeper and much more extensive and comprehensive global dialogues. My additional third point, the third difference which we see in the fourth industrial revolution is the fact that the winners take it all. Contrary to the previous industrial revolutions, it's very difficult to copy. So if you are a first mover, you are the winners. And this will determine global competition on a national, but also on a business level to a large extent, and I hope in a not too hostile way in the coming years. Now, just two last points. Public-private cooperation. Today, some people would say, until 2 years ago, until the crisis hit, it was business who was in the lead. And now with the crisis, with COVID, it's government who is in the lead. No. It should be governments and business. Governments and business have to cooperate in order to become a fast fish, because in our world of today, it's not anymore so much the big fish who eats the small fish, but it is the fast fish who eats the slow fish. And in order to be a fast fish and a big fish, hopefully, like Indonesia, you have to have two co-pilots, business and governments. My last point relates to trust. If business is really a force for good, which it has to be, business has to practice stakeholder capitalism. That's a concept I wrote a book about over 50 years ago, and I devoted my life to the promotion of stakeholder responsibility. Business should not only serve shareholders, but has to serve the people and to take care of our planet. Only in such a way, business will earn the trust which it needs to be an innovative force to make our society a better society. Let me conclude. When we look into the future, we can be full of confidence if we adhere to three concepts: innovative transformation, innovation, and cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Schwab, for the inspiring insights that you just shared. And we can learn that government and private sector must cooperate, and it's not about big fish versus small fish, but fast fish versus slow fish. And Professor also mentioned out that we are in a multiplicity of crises as we are challenged politically, economically, ecologically, socially, and technologically. And we need some transformative action that the governments can do three options: expansionary fiscal policy, as was the case during the pandemic, investing in long-term growth through massive infrastructure projects, and stimulating the economy and spurring higher productivity through the creation and curation of an entrepreneurial and innovation-oriented society. Ladies and gentlemen, going on to the next agenda with the same topic, harnessing the power of innovation for future economic growth. Now I would like to invite the chairman of Hon Hai Technology Group, Foxconn. Please welcome Mr. Yong Liu.
It is a privilege and also very challenging to follow the always eloquent Dr. Schwab. Distinguished guests, B20 host, Mr. Arshad, B20 chair, Ms. Shinta, colleagues, media, good morning. We are on the eve of history. Tremendous events are happening in our world. Calamities of climate change, COVID, conflict on a key continent, competition in technologies among major countries have deeply impacted industries. For next month, the G20 Troika will comprise of the Global South, Indonesia, India, and Brazil. This is a pivotal moment. Industry's innovation is the guide. It is the pathway for the future for equitable growth. I was asked to speak to the theme of harnessing the power of innovation for future economic growth. Let me respond by breaking it down into three fundamentals: share, collaborate, and thrive. World population is set to exceed 8 billion this year. Half of this total population live in just 7 countries. We are gathered in one of those countries today. The workforce in these populated nations reflect their potential. They are mobile and dedicated. They want to build skills and increase income to raise their living standards. They're willing to travel far from their homes. They're not looking for 9-to-5 jobs. They might need a place to live in order to work. Foxconn has been an early mover in many instances. We scale up in tech industries that are new to the economies we enter. We scale up in developing economies that don't yet have the robust infrastructures and policies to support the first mover investments. It is incredibly difficult. We make mistakes, but then we get better at what we do. We work with a range of stakeholders. We work with local and central governments of many countries. We work with best-in-class customers who are uncompromising about quality standards. We work with the community within our campuses. They are the size of small cities. That includes looking after health, hygiene, and social living. Creating the environment and managing innovation at scale is a key challenge. Technology and innovation done at scale is going to be very, very challenging. Foxconn and many Taiwanese companies have been doing this for many decades. We love to share our experience and help your country to quickly build up your industry without making the same mistakes we made. Collaborate. How do we collaborate? Let me respond by offering 3 more words: build, operate, and localize. BOL is placing the supply chain in your backyard for your domestic economy. BOL is collaboration with local communities. Your country then has the technology and the skills in your backyard. What are we talking about? GDP and jobs. Now, not later. A better ecosystem. BOL doesn't happen alone because of only tech innovation. Downstream will not work without upstream. These days, it takes more than one stakeholder. It counts with a supply chain that brings absolute and comparative advantages to your country. Later today, Foxconn and Indica will show how BOL collaboration can benefit the local industry. Thank you. Let's think different and dare forward to make a smarter world by transforming for good. I think this is what it means to recover together, recover stronger. Thrive. The definition of thriving in modern society consists of working towards 3 main goals: cleaner, greener, and smarter. Over 100 countries are considering or have set net zero deadlines. At least 33 of them have made it a law or official policies. We are doing it against us. Common us might be about a reliance on fossil fuel energy. My odds have more to do with overcoming technology entry barriers and finding the right pool of human talent. At the same time, as we work towards establishing a cleaner and a greener society, we also have a tremendous opportunity to transform into a smarter society. Transforming a country's transportation network and mobility lifestyle is just one part of this journey. to net zero. It is key to sustainable economy. I strongly believe an established EV ecosystem not only has the potential to impact a country's GDP, but also diversify the industrial supply chain and create more jobs. The benefits of EV ecosystem brings to a country's economy is substantial. Extraordinary and affordable devices are imagination made real. In the beginnings of this century, I believe a pivotal moment has arrived again. Taiwan is your most trusted and reliable partner. Through sharing and collaboration, let's strive together and create a better world. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again, Mr. Yong Liu, Chairman of Honhai Technology Group, Foxconn, for delivering such an important message. 3 fundamentals in harnessing the power of innovation for future economic growth that are share, collaborate, and also thrive. Foxconn loves to share experience, help your country to quickly build up your industry without making the same mistakes as they did. Collaborate, it means build and also localize, whilst thrive means greener, cleaner, and also smarter society. And it is also interesting to revisit what our 2 speakers earlier had to say. Mr. Airlangga Hartarto also mentioned that governments must be at the driver's seat in responding to future challenges through stronger public-private partnership for concrete policy actions. He also mentioned about partnership between the public and private sector is key to the post-pandemic economic architecture. And towards the future, we must prepare for another green revolution, innovating for a major transformation towards a greener, bluer, and more digital economy that protects our planet and our future. He then proceeded to invite all of you, business community, governments, NGOs, to be part of the country's transformation. Professor Klaus Schwab also mentioned about innovation, ladies and gentlemen, and he pointed out that in terms of harnessing the power of innovation, he saw 5 imperatives for moving forward. The first one is leveraging the full potential of the 4th industrial revolution, that is, do it holistically. And focus in green economy, as green technology costs have fallen significantly over the last decade and will most likely continue to do so. And therefore, a fast transition to clean energy is cheaper than slow or no action. Thirdly, create genuine private-public partnership, make innovation socially sustainable, and last but not least, build the human capital needed for innovation. He then concluded with government and private sector must cooperate, and once again, it's not about big fish versus small fish, but it's about fast fish versus slow fish. And apart from the speakers that we had earlier today, we're going to have a very packed agenda today, that including a conversation with the Binance CEO, Mr. Changpeng Zhao, and of course, Mr. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, and now Twitter also. And we're also going to take a listen to what Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, in her capacity as UN Secretary General Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, has to say, as well as actress Anne Hathaway, in her capacity as UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, speaking about unlocking the full potential of women in the economy. Now, the setting is ready, ladies and gentlemen, for our panel's discussion 1. It is time for us to gain deeper insight about the topic of harnessing the power of innovation for future economic growth. Now, I would like to invite the moderator and panelists to come up on stage. The moderator for today, Mr. Jack Azaguri, Group Chief Executive Accenture, and the speakers are Ms. Candice Johnson, co-founder of SES and Laurel Teleport Europe, Mr. Christian Guevara, Chief Executive Officer of Telefonica Brazil, Mr. Anthony Tan, CEO and co-founder of Grab, Mr. Alvin Sadat Maja, President Director of Elang Mahkota Teknologi, Mr. Deep Kapuria, Chairman of the High Tech Group. Mr. Azaguri, the time is yours.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished participants. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you together here and with distinguished panel. I also want to say a huge congratulations for a flawless organization of this B20 forum that is surrounded by the unique and warm hospitality of Indonesia. We have an amazing panel here. I will do quick introductions and set the context. In alphabetical order, I'll start with Alvin Sarat-Miadia, who is the President Director of MTech, one of the region's largest and most successful technology, media, and healthcare companies. Anthony Tan, CEO and co-founder of Grab. The company needs no introduction, one of the most successful startups in the world, with a super app that covers payments, delivery services, ride-hailing, and much more. Candice Johnson, founder of SES and co-founder of Laurel Teleport Europe. She is the entrepreneurial mind behind some of the largest and most successful satellite companies and chairs one of the largest private equity funds related to space. Christian Guevara, CEO of Telefonica Brazil, also known as Vivo, one of Brazil's largest telecommunication company. And last, but by no means least, Deep Kapuria, chairman of the High Tech Group, the highly successful India-based auto components and technology manufacturer. I want to set a little bit of context before we get to the panel discussion. We have made some progress during the pandemic around internet and connectivity. But today, 2.7 billion people in our planet still are disconnected. We have to do better. We have a responsibility as business and government leaders to do better. We know that telecommunications and digital connectivity drive GDP growth. The UN has showed it. AI can drive double-digit increase in GDP. And our own research shows that 88% of CEOs, many of you in the room, are going to significantly increase digital spending despite the backdrop of uncertain economic conditions. 60% of global GDP relies on digital communications technology. But the RAND Corporation has said that 14 of the G20 nations can miss out on $11.5 trillion of economic growth because of the skills gap. And that's what it boils down to for me, closing the digital skills gap. We have to be talent creators, not just talent consumers. We have to do better. At Accenture, 20% of our entry-level hires in the US do no longer have 4-year degrees because we focus on skills, not what university they came from. Our own research shows that if we doubled the level of digital fluency amongst women, we would close the pay gap, the gender pay gap, by 21%. And we also face a problem with 32 million refugees around the world. And I know many of your companies and ours are hiring refugees from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, and other parts of the world. So let's start the discussion. And I'm going to start with you, Anthony. And my first question, I'd like to get your perspective on how innovation can drive global economic growth.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here. Well, first of all, in recent years, you just talked about it, it's been tough for all of us. But there has been silver linings. So for example, if you look at the recent studies, whether it's Accenture, McKinsey, many of the shows how digital adoption has been accelerated over the 4 or 5 years ahead of time. And we've seen it, one of the other silver linings, 100 million new internet users in Southeast Asia. But how did this happen? I mean, we've seen actually many of our what we call UMKM or small and medium or micro SMEs have a tough time trying to embrace this change. And companies like us, how do we help them embrace this change? How do we uplift them? One thing we've done is just during the pandemic, they had no choice. Lockdowns, they didn't know how to start their business. They didn't know how to restart, how to sell. So we created things like GrabMart, where we accelerated their business. Imagine, in your wet traditional market, on demand now you can get that service for all your grocery needs. We've been able to do that. I'll give you a quick story. Ibu Siska, which is a lady selling a small stall about this size. She used Grab. It accelerated her business. She now generates about $15,000 US a month. And she even knows how to use our digital advertising tools, our financial tools on her app. Right? This was a lady in her 50s, and now 90% of her business is online. That's the beauty of really accelerating that. But again, that's not enough. I think even building new tools, forcing ourselves to innovate for uplifting them is insufficient. One other thing we need to do even beyond that is how do we digitize even beyond just Jakarta, which is a great city, but the tier 2, tier 3 cities. And with that, I am very blessed, Grab is very blessed to have a great partner, MTech, who together we acted on Kota Masa Depan, which meaning building future cities. And together we've been able to accelerate digitization across these cities. But I'll let Alvin talk more about that.
That's an amazing story, how you change people's lives. Alvin, I'm going to turn to you. MTech was founded in '83 as a distributor, now a huge organization. Your thoughts on innovation to drive economic growth?
Thank you, and it's an honor to be here. I will speak from a very practical experience for us as a business group, where we have witnessed economic growth driven by the various ways of innovation and technology. For us as a group, we are able to enter into many new businesses which were previously considered to be off limits in the offline/analog world. Businesses like e-commerce, retail, payment, digital banking, online healthcare, OTT, which in the old world required a lot of capital, resources, and time to build the infrastructure needed to support a competitive business in those verticals, were suddenly open. And technology have completely rewritten the rules of engagement of what can and can't be done, how fast you can scale a business and build a business. If you can provide a service that is relevant and value adding to your customer, then you can build a very sizable business quickly. So there's been a big reshuffling of the deck across the various industries where new players have emerged thanks to technology and innovation. Secondly, and I think I feel that we have been engaging in a lifelong and never-ending process of digitizing our traditional businesses, transforming, tech-enabling, if you may, which is much more difficult to do compared to creating new businesses from scratch, where you have a modern platform and you can rethink everything from the ground up. Because of COVID, we are forced to accelerate that process and really relook at business processes, supply chain, customer facing. And because many of our businesses are in the services industry, we have so much data, which in the old world is somewhat meaningless. But in today's world, with a modern data management platform, so much can be derived, so many insights can be derived as to our customer, our market, which in turn can be used to provide a better service and value add to our customer. Thirdly, this is something that I feel is often very overlooked and also underappreciated, is the importance of having an innovative and forward-looking government policy. As an Indonesian, I have been very proud and fortunate to have a government under the leadership of President Jokowi, who's been able to not only have great vision, but marry that vision with leadership and execution, so that the policy that comes out really results and fosters wealth creation, job creation, and the eventual trickle down and multiplier effect in the economy. Take a very practical example of nickel. I think 6-7 years ago, Indonesia used to export less than $1 billion worth of nickel and nickel products. And since the government came up with the policy that the midstream and downstream process needs to be done onshore, we have seen one of the biggest value creation, job creation, and and the skill transfer from the developed world to developing world, which is immense. And in this year, I think alone, we will see more than $20 billion worth of export in the nickel category. And when the downstreaming is complete with the battery and EV, I think the numbers will approach more than 100 billion eventually. So it is clear that the great policy making, very forward-looking policy making, implemented correctly, can create so much value. So out of those practical experience, I'm a big believer that innovation and technology can really drive economic growth forward.
Certainly very compelling, and there's no doubt there's been an acceleration during COVID, a compression of the time it takes to transform. Deep, I'm going to go to you, and I'd like to get your views on lessons learned. Technology doesn't always deliver on its promise, but I'd like to get your views on lessons learned in your application of technology and innovation.
You know, innovation is something that is possibly the lifeline for any company. Whether it's conventional manufacturing, we are in both, or a technology company. However, like, which was just expressed, that when you are in a legacy kind of a manufacturing environment, to bring in innovation is very, very different than to bring in innovation to a technology company. So when you're trying to get a manufacturing company to innovate, you need the buy-in for a lot of issues in terms of how you get the adaptability, and not only adaptability, but the acceptance as a culture of innovation. And that's the struggle. Many a times what we have done is used analogies. When you're trying to change, you bring in analogies to say that how can you do quick, let's say, tool change in less than a minute when you're taking 30 minutes doing it. So you bring them to a Formula One car and say, this is how it works. So these analogies sort of bring that culture to an innovative culture. But on the other side, the technology side, you have a very different side of workforce. A workforce which is ready to go. So many times you have to hold them to a way that you have limited issue of experimentation. So what it happens is that how do you limit yourself and also say that, okay, you can fail. That acceptance is that when you design an experiment to fail, and what you don't actually reward is just success, but you also say that not doing anything is something not acceptable. I think that brings in a lot of the cultural change to bring in innovation.
I fully agree. The importance of failing fast, but not acceptable not to try. Candice, you've architected one of the world's largest satellite space systems. I'd like to get your views on lessons learned from innovation.
Yes. So I have asked if I could perhaps show some slides, and our wonderful tech company, there you go. Okay. So, I was born in a family that my satellites for the United States, and then did the world's first private satellite system. So from the time I was 5 years old, when I received a toy Sputnik on the Christmas tree with Santa Claus inside, I thought everything good came from space. And, innovation so important. But you know what? Inspiration, I think, is even better. So this is a picture when I was 30 years old, 35, and we're in Kourou, and we're launching my first satellite, SES Astra 1. The Grand Duke of Luxembourg is behind me, good-looking guy. The Prime Minister of Luxembourg with the white hair is behind him. 5 years the world's first private transborder satellite system. You see, in 1983, you can see that we are covering all of Europe. Not half of Europe, as it was at that time, but all of Europe. And so when we launched our satellite in 1988, 9 months later, the wall fell down, and we had a satellite system that could cover all of Europe. And we started it from that very, very little country in Luxembourg, between Germany and France. You can barely see it on the thing. So, you know, you always have to go forward. And when the wall fell down, I conceived the first transporter launch cooperation, commercializing not American technology like Elon Musk, Russian technology with American marketing, ILS, International Launch Services, and you see my satellite, Astra, on the top of that, 1995, April 9th. It's one thing to become number one, it's another thing to stay number one, and circumstances made it that if I was going to keep my satellite system, SES, Astra, independent, I needed to go global. And so 2001, I architected SES Global and became the world's largest satellite system. Now, ladies and gentlemen, remember that first picture where unfortunately I was the only woman? Well, you know what? Things change. And so here, Oceania Women's Network Satellite, 10 years ago, a couple of women and I in the Pacific and Global Telecom Women's Network, we got together and we created and helped create Pacific. And I'm very proud to say that we're bringing high-throughput broadband internet to all of the islands in the Pacific, and also here, there we go, also to Indonesia. And it's so great to work with, isn't it? And private initiative, I mean, we just got together, this satellite, to colleges, to universities, to hotels, to hospitals, to villages, etc. I have described my life as going from providing satellites, or using satellites to provide universal access, and going to use satellites to provide access to the universe. And indeed, we do have space debris now. We have intended and unintended objects, and we are also using now satellites to be able to use, to observe our Earth, to help with the Earth observation, with the ocean observation. And we also, such as North Star, to be able to space traffic management, very important. And Jack talked about the fact that I'm also the chair of Serra from Space, the world's largest space tech fund. We're investing in innovation. I see everything. I see young people coming together and building in labs for, you know, food on Earth and food on the moon. I see another young woman building her own spaceship to do pharmaceutical possibilities in microgravity. You know, hopefully one day we're going to also get a, let's just see if we can get this, there we go, an all-female space crew for the International Space Station. So.
It's an amazing story, and also great to see the progress in diversity from your first picture in the 80s
I thought it was kind of fun.
Today.
Particularly for the women empowerment here in Indonesia. Yeah.
Christian, I'm going to go to you. You chair the B20 Digitization Task Force. Amazing work in Brazil in terms of promoting and deploying digital technology and connectivity. Your thoughts on the growth, how to drive more innovation, how it drives economic growth, and also maybe your view in developing countries.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm from Brazil, not far away from Indonesia, but being here for these 2 days, you can see a lot of similar things about the challenge that we face in our country and you face here in Indonesia. Now, we are like large country with large population, and I do believe that digitalization can change, especially reduce inequality, include other people, and bring much more diversity to our companies. So during the pandemic, innovation was accelerated. I think Anthony gave an example, and we could see this example not only in our company, but in our customers, our clients. Companies that were not prepared to handle the digital relationship with customers, they suffered a lot. And at the same time, they started to accelerate this implementation. Even us, as family members, we had everyone back home, and kids needed to go to school, homeschooling. We needed to work from home. So we have like the largest fiber network in Brazil. We have today 22 million home passed with fiber. And we saw the demand for fiber rising during the pandemic because we were so used to have download, and suddenly we were also needed to use upload. Video became part of our lives. So that's innovation. Companies started to invest in cloud. Companies started to invest in collaborative tools. Companies started to invest in cybersecurity, because protection of the digital world is also changing. So that's a big shift. And as an organization, we need also to change many things. We are now working in a hybrid model. We started before the pandemic. We were maybe a little bit ahead of time. But now that's a reality that people really want to work in an environment that can be on-site, but also working from home. So we need to adapt. That's also innovation. To attract people, talented people, to develop new skills, we need to change not only the culture, that's also important, but the way we work. So we are trying to implement many different methodologies to work with more design thinking, more critical solving, and also bringing diversity to our workforce. People need to be seen as a society in our workforce. They was talking about gender, we need to talk about race, we need to talk about people with disabilities. We need to include everyone to make it really foster innovation, creativity, and that's what we are doing today. And in the B20, participating as a co-chair was great because the challenges are there, and we need, as a country, Indonesia, then next year is going to be India, then it's going to be Brazil, 3 countries with similar things where we believe digitalization needs to be more accessible, and it has the power to change inequality, to bring education to those who don't have it in the physical world, brings health to those who don't have it in the physical world, bring financial inclusion to those who don't have it, and there are many examples here. So again, I think we're in the beginning of the journey, and innovation has to be part of our journey as a company, but also as a provider for solutions for customers, B2C and B2B.
That's amazing developments in Brazil. I'm going to move to an important question, which we heard earlier, the role of governments, public partnerships. We heard that earlier from Professor Schwab. And I'm going to start with you, Deep. I'd like to get your view on public-private partnerships, the role of government, how to collaborate.
It's possibly the most important thing going. The challenge is to translate it. It's a great idea, public-private partnership. It's been there for a while. It's a lot of I think the way that it's being approached, at least in India, is that get the participation both on the side of technology and inside of investments. It's important because if you see overall in the given situation, and specifically in the recent past, after COVID, that the companies are not making that much money to spare for the innovation or technology. But on the other side, it becomes important for the government to come in at this point so that they can work together on these projects. Let me give you an example of it. I also chair a public-private partnership company, which is called Global Innovation and Technology Alliance. It was started about 10 years back with the whole purpose to create an ecosystem for innovation and get companies to start, and even the startups to start doing research and development. And the concept was that not only use the government funds, but also get into collaboration with the other nations as well. Today we have 9 countries that we are working with. And how it works is that's a kind of one company from, let's say, we have a partnership with Israel, just as an example, and they have tremendous amount of traction from that side. So one company from Israel, one company from India, let's say $1 million worth of project. So $250,000 from the Indian company, $250,000 from the Israeli company, and the balance comes from the governments. So they can do an innovation project of $1 million, which may or may not work. You know, you have to accept that when you're getting into an R&D and innovation project, it can fail. And that's very, very important to accept. So that's one of the thoughts that how the governments can collaborate. The other way that is also being done is of incubation centers. Incubation centers are not only being partnered with universities, but also with the private companies. Like we have innovation, kind of a incubation center, which we allow the MSMEs to come in, work from the desks, and provide them some kind of help in terms of literally getting from the aspect of the government funds to the private funds. So you know that the proverbial valley of death is avoided. So there's a public fund, and when they get to the private fund, that's when a lot of the SMEs lose their way and actually die. So that's how it's all operating. And there are many, many such examples. In the interest of time, I'll stop here.
We're going to come close to wrapping up. Anthony, I'd like your final thoughts on the topic of public partnership, and especially what it means in developing countries. Anthony.
Sure. So just two, given time is short, I think number one is governments and companies like ours, how do you work on minimal to no friction? One, I just want to celebrate the Indonesian government. We worked with the Ministry of Cooperatives. They were super helpful. They helped us onboard many, many thousands of wet market, traditional wet markets all across Indonesia. So just working together, again, we are small. It's about leveraging and working and standing on shoulders of giants. And there's no better giant than the Indonesian government. That's number one. Number two is, I think on public and private collaboration, we take, for example, EV. EV is a massive social issue, or climate change, but specifically, how do you deal with it with EVs? Effectively, there is a cold start problem today, where if there's not enough charging stations, a lot of people don't want to invest in EVs, and if there's not enough EVs, people don't invest in charging stations. So that is one complex issue that we can partner on. So I'll give you an example here. Grab again. We decided to say, look, we have to solve this with partners like many here, PLN, Pertamina, Gesit, VR. We've been able to partner and launch. Today we have over 8,500 electric vehicles. They've done over 100 million kilometers in electric kilometers. Again, thanks to the customers who love it. We've saved over 10,000 tons of carbon emissions. But again, we're just in the beginning. This can only happen with amazing collaboration. And again, by standing on the shoulders of giants, and many of them are here.
Yeah, and you've outlined the role of technology, innovation combined with sustainability. These things go hand in hand. I want to thank this distinguished panel. It's been a huge privilege. Please join me in a huge round of applause for our panel.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Azaguri, thank you so much for the insightful discussion. And we got several important notes from the discussion. It's very enlightening as well. Ms. Candace Johnson, co-founder of SES and Laurel Teleport Europe, thank you so much for sharing to us. And she said that innovation is important, but inspiration is even better. And the story of SES that she shared was so beautiful and was so inspiring. SES, for those who are unaware of it, is a satellite communication service provider that offers telecommunication services. And also, she shared about the progress of diversity there in her company. Mr. Christian Gebra, CEO of Telefonica Brazil, also shared about Indonesia, India, and Brazil will become 3 of the biggest economies in the world, and they will need technology to bring things digitally to people that they don't have physically. It's really interesting as well what Mr. Anthony Tan shared, that many of MSMEs or UMKM in Indonesian term had a tough time embracing the change when digital economy kicked in, especially when the pandemic hit. It was dark days for them, for the MSMEs, but Grab's innovation helped MSMEs not only to survive, but up to this day, to thrive. And working together between government and private sector is truly important, and public and private collaboration example is EV or electric vehicle, and Grab has been able to partner with 8,500 EV owners because customers love it and it saves carbon emission. Mr. Alvin Saratmaja of MTech Group pointed out that MTech has been engaging in never-ending digitizing its business, and because of COVID, MTech was forced to accelerate that process. And no less important is great policy and also implementation. And for example, nickel. In the past, Indonesia exported raw nickel ore, but not anymore, because nowadays, Republic of Indonesia exports processed and value-added goods. So once again, thank you so much for the discussion, and we're looking forward to another discussion or one-on-one conversation after this. So after this, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a one-on-one conversation discussing about investing in future talents, technology, and financial resources with Mr. Chang Peng Chow. It's really interesting. The CEO of Binance once tweeted, in particular on Sunday, saying that self-custody is a fundamental human right, and you are free to do it at any time. Just make sure you do it right. And it's very intriguing to, listen more and learn more from Mr. Chang Peng Chow. So ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, that our next agenda is one-on-one conversation with the main topic of investing in future talents, technology, and financial resources. So please welcome on stage the moderator and also speaker, Mr. Aldi Haryo Pratomo, Vice Chair of Indonesia FinTech Association, as the moderator, and of course, Mr. Chang Peng Chow, the CEO of Binance.
Hello everybody, my name is Aldi. I'm the Vice Chair of the Indonesian FinTech Association, and we're here today with CZ, who runs the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange. At the peak, they traded 24 hours, $170 billion of crypto. So this week has been a really eventful week for crypto. So despite all that's going on, thank you for being here with us, CZ. What have you enjoyed the most about Indonesia so far?
I've actually been to Indonesia, specifically Bali, many times. It's a fantastic place. In addition to being a very nice vacation resort, Bali is also the crypto center of Indonesia, right? There's a lot of crypto people here. So we have quite an active community here. I've been meeting with our Binance angels, who are community volunteers, just learning more about what's going on here. So it's been a fantastic experience.
No, thank you, and we hope you keep coming to Bali.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, let's start with a quick intro. I think on crypto and Binance, right? So we're at B20 Indonesia. The audience is filled with global business and world leaders. What do you think it's important for them to know about crypto and Binance?
Those are big topics. I think crypto, the way I would describe it is, if you think about internet, it's just a new technology. It was just a new technology for transferring information.
Yep.
That's all the technology is. It's just data packets over a wire or over the air. But because of that, we're able to build entire industries, new economies, virtual worlds. Today, if somebody take away your phone, you feel really awkward. This new technology, crypto, is just a new technology for transferring value. That's all it is. So, but with this new technology, we can now build new business models, which is changing the way we do fundraising. It's changing the way we do investments. It's changing the way we do payments. Now we can do micropayments. We can do cross-border remittances. So we can do NFTs, metaverse. All of this is going to come. Well, some of them are already here, like global fundraising using either ICOs, IDOs, IEOs.
Yep.
It's already here. So if one technology deals with information, this new technology deals with money.
Yep.
So the impact is going to be tremendous. You will impact economic sectors very heavily. The technology for a better form of money is going to give you a better form of fintech industry, financial sector, which is going to be the pillar for every other sector. So it's very important to understand this technology. At the same time, there's a lot of risks. We're in a new industry. We've seen over the past week things go crazy here. So in the industry. So we do need some regulations. We do need to do this properly. We do need to do this in a stable way. So all of that is happening. Binance is one of the larger players in the industry. Most people know Binance as a cryptocurrency exchange, but we actually have much more than that. We also invest and own multiple decentralized wallets. We also own CoinMarketCap, which is the most visited website in crypto for information. We invest heavily in DeFi, in blockchain technologies, etc. So we also invest very strongly in local economies in different parts of the world. So we also we are probably one of the few platforms who push very heavily on education and charity, etc. So Binance is more like an ecosystem of tools that we want to help people to access crypto with.
Oh, thank you. That's a very broad explanation. So let's dive into the use cases, right? Because ultimately it's about being useful. That's what a technology should be. So you mentioned about crypto's function as enabling entrepreneurs anywhere to raise money globally, like Polygon in India, for example, right? But on the flip side of that is there risk for capital flight, because if money can come in, money can also come out. This has been a concern that some regulators and banks have expressed. What would you say to that concern over the benefits of actually being able to raise money globally?
Yeah, so I would actually say the reverse. If money couldn't go out, money will not come in, right? So as as kind of an offshore business, to start a business in Indonesia, to register for a license, I think you have to deposit like $5 million US-ish.
Yeah, around, yeah.
Right, so like 3 to 5 million-ish US dollars. And the first question people will think about, hey, I can wire the money in, but at some point, can I wire the money out? So if the second one is not guaranteed, it's not open, people will not wire money in. So, and blockchain provides a very, very useful tool for entrepreneurs in Indonesia or in any other place in the world to raise money. Today, any entrepreneur with a decent background, with good reputation, with a decent product idea can raise 10, 20 million US dollars in a matter of days. Whereas doing the same thing through the traditional VCs will take years. And also, I think Indonesia does not quite have a very strong VC ecosystem. Like, compared to the size, in dollar terms, compared to the US guys, are much smaller.
It's still young.
Yeah, still young. But just because we're still young here, we can leverage a new technology. In the US, the VCs are so established, they're actually more scared of this new technology. Because we're young and we don't have such heavy establishments yet, we can just use this new technology for entrepreneurs to raise money. This is the most direct form of foreign direct investment. So every country, every leader I spoke to, everyone wants foreign direct investment. But why don't you let entrepreneurs raise money using the blockchain through ICOs, etc.? So this technology provides that.
Yeah, so your recommendation essentially is for the regulators just to open up, right? But also another part of what brings foreign capital in and capital out is taxation. There was a recent crypto tax introduced, for example, in Indonesia and some other markets. What do you have to say about those?
Yeah, so I actually think the current tax, the new tax that was introduced recently in Indonesia, it's not optimal. I think tax is perfectly fine, and the way to achieve the highest amount of that you can tax is actually through, I think, which could be wrong, is actually through a lower tax number. So look, if you take things to the extreme, right? If you tax $99 out of a $100 transaction, you're not going to get any tax because no one's going to do that transaction. And also in crypto, there's less of a country border concept. When you tax the local entities very heavy, well, the local the transactions that happen on local platforms very heavily, all those transactions are going to move to offshore platforms. And then you actually end up taxing very little. If you tax a little bit and the transaction volume is high, then the total amount of tax you receive is actually higher, right? So it doesn't mean higher percentage tax always give you the highest return or highest tax collected. Also, I personally would highly recommend don't tax on the user transactions. If you tax 0.12% per user transaction, that's not going to be a lot of transactions. Tax the businesses in the industry. So tax corporate income. And in order to tax corporate income, you should give licenses more easily. When you give a license, then you can ask for data. Then you have a conversation. So then you have control. If you don't give licenses, and most platforms are operating either offshore or in other ways, so quite a number of things are counterintuitive. It's much better to give licenses, to be open, and then I highly recommend not taxing the user transactions, but tax corporate income.
Understood. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So let's move on to banking and finance. There's quite a few bankers in the room today, right? So do you believe that DeFi and crypto will replace traditional finance? And how will the two worlds interact?
Yeah, so I think in the short term, no. Long term, maybe. It's possible. Mm-hmm. I think short term, today crypto is still pretty hard to use. I think this is probably not a very crypto centric crowd.
Yeah.
So I think I would guess most people will find it very difficult to download their wallet, do a backup of the private key, store it in multiple places, encrypt it, and then have a way to pass that on to their kids when they're no longer around. So all of that is quite hard to do today. I think today, 99% of the wealth is still in fiat currencies, traditional financial systems. So we need to integrate the two so that people can start to use this new technology in a steady fashion. But the growth here is going to be faster than the growth in the traditional financial spaces. So so that trajectory looks kind of like that, but kind of bumpy, to be honest. But in the long future, though, I do think as the 10, 20 years, as the next generation comes into play, they will be crypto natives. Like the teenagers today, they look at crypto, they think that's just very normal. So 20 years, like the teenagers are 30-something, they will be doing businesses in crypto only. So crypto is a much easier form of money. It's much easier to do transactions once you know how to use it. It's much lower friction, and it's much global. So it has some advantages. It has some really significant advantages, but today it's just not hard. It's kind of hard to use. So over the long term, when we solve those usability problems, I think more and more people will migrate to crypto.
Yeah, and you always mention in the past about Binance's role as being a platform of platforms, right? Where you're leading the charge in building the technology to increase mass adoption. So What do you mean by that? Maybe explain to the audience. And what are the things that still need to be built in your mind today to get so that everybody in this room in the next few B20s will actually have a self-hosted wallet?
Yeah, so what we try to do is just to provide access to crypto. It could be liquidity that people want to buy and sell. That's a very basic form of it. That's the exchange. Most people think of us as only doing that. But anything that helps people, like CoinMarketCap, is a place for people to access crypto information. So most people use that website to look up, coin, the history, etc. So happy to provide that. Even custody, self-custody wallets, as we were mentioning before, Trust Wallet, we provide that. That's a tool that people hold their own private keys on themselves, and they hold their crypto funds. And we have we don't want to control. Well, we don't want to touch that. So, and we also help other entrepreneurs in the space. We invest very heavily in the ecosystem, and actually our investment has done really, really well over the last 4 years. I think we've done over 70x over the last 4 years, wow. even at today's prices. So yeah, so we just want to help to build tools. I think the talk I did here 3 days ago. Yeah, so I learned from a very senior guy in Google. He said, look, Google provides a number of infrastructure services in the internet space. They do a bunch of stuff that people don't even think about, like the time on your phone is synced with a Google Internet server. The DNS, the 8.8.8, that's also provided by Google. So all of those things are free, but the internet becomes more usable. So we just want to provide any tool for people to use crypto for.
Yeah, and as you do this, I think you'll become bigger and more powerful and more central in the industry. So right now, we looked at the spot trading volume for the last 24 hours. Binance was 13 billion. The next one, the closest one, is 1.3 billion, right? How big is too big? And what are your thoughts about, as you get bigger, your responsibility in the ecosystem to protect consumers?
Yeah, so there are natural network effects and centralization versus decentralization forces at play. There's economy of scale. And so the larger exchanges like us, we can invest very heavily on security. And we can invest, because of our liquidity, people get better prices by trading on Binance. So they come to us more. So there's a network effect. So the bigger ones do tend to get bigger, even in a free market.
That's right.
So that's just natural economic forces. At a certain size, though, I think for our industry, it is better to sort of have more decentralization. Today, though, at the same time, I think the proper players, if we do things properly, people actually come to you. There is quite a lot of players in our space that try to cut corners to grow quickly. And that actually destroys consumer trust. When they don't trust them, they don't go to them. They actually go to a platform they trust. So I think just running, I really encourage all the other players in the space, run businesses very solidly, very properly. That's the best way to grow. So we try to help grow other exchanges, other DeFi protocols, other wallets, etc. We invest heavily in them. We invest in other centralized exchanges too, try to help them grow. We also invest in a local exchange here in Indonesia. So we try to help them grow, but there are natural forces. So we don't really control how big we are, how small we are, etc. We just try to provide the best service, the most secure, the most reliable service to our users.
And in terms of protecting consumers, what is the role of regulators, the government, the central bank, in your view, because of recent events? Right? FTX collapsed recently, and there could be more, right? Especially in the derivative sector, for example. Like, what would be the role of the central bank and other regulators in this case? I think the industry collectively has a role to protect consumers, to protect everybody. So it's not just regulators. Regulators does absolutely have a role, but it's also not 100% of their responsibility. No one can protect a bad player, to be very frank. If a guy is very good at lying and is very good at just pretending to be what he's not, somebody wants to violate the law is not going to prevent that. The law can help to reduce that. As industry players, we should be more vocal about it. We should set very strong standards for the industry. Actually, one of the things we will do very soon, given the events that happen, we will try to
collect the other industry players together and form an industry association globally, try to deal with some of the common standards in business, etc. So as industry players, we have a responsibility as well. The VC investors have a responsibility. They invest in businesses that didn't work. That hurt a lot of users. They're also responsible. The consumers are responsible as well. The schools are responsible. Why aren't we teaching people about consumer financial risk assessment in schools? So everybody's responsible. No one can completely prevent it. But the regulators do have a role. We do need slightly more. We do need to increase the clarity of regulations and the sophistication of regulations in the crypto space. Most of the regulations today deal with KYC and AML. The natural response is to borrow the regulations from traditional financial systems. How do we regulate banks? Most regulators think of crypto exchanges like banks. But crypto exchanges operate very, very differently from banks. In a bank, it's very, very normal for a bank to move user assets for investments and try to make returns. In crypto, if you run a crypto exchange that way, it's almost guaranteed to go down. To the traditional financial regulators, to them, they may not even be thinking about this before this week. But we, Binance, have always held 100% reserves of user assets. And we're leading the way to do proof of reserves, publicly disclosing all of our cold wallet addresses. And other industry players are forced to follow, because if they don't follow, they become even smaller. And when they follow, some of them have some issues now. But we as an industry, we need to increase the transparency. We need to work very closely with regulators all around the world to make this industry more robust. But there's a strong role for regulators to play, but we can't blame this on anybody, or any single party.
Understand. Actually, that's actually the point, right? Because crypto is a borderless technology, and yet regulators are now operated based on borders. So what is your thoughts on that, crypto as a global phenomenon versus like local exchanges that exist in different markets?
Yeah, so there's like a balancing force between technology innovation versus traditional concept of a country border.
Yep.
If you think about a country border, that's a human-made concept, right? So in the natural world, the country border doesn't exist. It's just like a bunch of guys agree, this is the border, that becomes the border. And now the technologies we have, we're post-internet. We now have blockchain. The internet doesn't have a lot of borders. Today, when you use the internet, you do a Google search, you click on our Twitter ad, guess what? That's run by a company in the US. It's kind of borderless. And when you click on an ad, that revenue goes to the US or some other country, or it could be a local company here servicing other people around the world. But in the blockchain world now, we're post-internet, it's going to be much, much more global. So each country should try to develop their local talent, the local, what we call Web3 economy, so that they can service the rest of the world. The better the country, the better countries that can do that, the more money they will make from the rest of the world. So the old concept of like limiting everything by a country border is going to be quite tough going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned about talent, actually, interestingly, because I think the competition for talent is also global now, right? And you yourself actually worked in worked in the crypto or like a trade exchange in Tokyo, right, a while back in 2005. What advice would you give to the Gen Z now, who is starting out, right? They were digitally native, now they're crypto native. What would you say to them today to build their careers?
It's a tricky one. So I think different people have different skill sets. I typically recommend people, especially the younger generation, to become good at one thing first. Because of the global competitiveness, today we can hire the best programmer anywhere in the world, in Indonesia, in Jakarta, in other places. They can work from home. So the competition is global now. So you got to be very good at what you do. And if you try to be very good at many things, it's quite a bit harder than trying to be good at one thing first. But as you become more like seasoned, more experienced, people can become more generalists. Founders, CEOs are typically generalists. But I typically recommend people to be good at one thing first, and then grow from that. And also have a very global mindset. Don't just look for jobs in the local economy. If you're a programmer, for example, there probably are higher paying jobs in more developed countries, etc. But you can work from here and live here, and it's a beautiful lifestyle here, and have those jobs. And also learn about new technologies. The world is changing really, really quickly. So for the younger generation, always learn about new technologies.
No, thank you. Any closing statements for the audience?
Not much. I mean, so over the last week, there's so much turmoil in our industry. I think, but I want everybody to understand that's not reflective of everything in the industry. The industry goes through ups and downs. We have one or maybe even more bad players in the industry, but the industry is still growing. So we're still building. Yeah. So thank you for your support.
Yeah. Thank you very much, CZ, for your time today. Everybody, CZ. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Aldi, thank you so much, and also Mr. Chow for the inspiration and stories that you just shared. And we can learn that self-custody is a fundamental human right. That's what Mr. Chow tweeted on Sunday. You are free to do it at any time, just make sure to do it right. And he also explained and mentioned that crypto is actually like internet in the first days. It was a new technology for transferring information, internet, back then. But because of what we were able to build, technologies, communication, etc., thanks to the internet. And crypto is just like the internet. It's a new technology, but now we can do many things, different business model, transferring money, storing money, and many other activities. And it comes with risk, as with other new technologies. And he also pointed out that current taxation done by governments is actually not optimum. Don't tax on transaction, but tax on the corporate income. And because of big liquidity, he also said that more people come to Binance, and he also pointed out that we do need more decentralization. Mr. Chow also pointed out that industry has to protect consumers, not only the government that has to do it. Industry players need to set very high tone and standard for the industry itself, and regulator does have a role. We need to make it clearer in regards with the regulation on cryptocurrency. All right, now we're moving on to another exciting, and I can guarantee this must be one of the sessions that you have been following and looking up to. And we're having another insightful one-on-one conversation with one of the top global leaders in technology, with the main topic of navigating future disruption of global technological innovation.
A little less conversation, a little more action. All this aggravation ain't satisfaction in me. A little more bite, a little less spark, a little less fight, a little more.
All right, that was the back sound, not my voice though. The bass sound was so cool. I'd like to invite Mr. Anindya Bakri, who has been joining us now, the CEO and President Director of PT Bakri and Brothers, and also the one and only Mr. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla Inc., SpaceX, and now Twitter as well, joining us virtually. Take it away, Mr. Bakri.
Ladies and gentlemen, no need introduction. Please welcome Elon Musk.
Sorry, we're actually just weirdly. Hi, we had a power outage about 3 minutes before this call. My apologies. That's why I'm like bizarrely in the dark here.
Elon, you are lucky because you have unprofessional moderator. It's the first time I'm doing it. But I'm sure we're going to have fun, especially when we wear this shirt.
Great.
Thank you for wearing it. We sent it 15,000 kilometers across the globe.
Thank you. Thanks for this looking shirt.
Just quick thing, Elon. The batik that you have is from Central Sulawesi, from small village. It is a place where you have a lot of nickels there, so you may like to visit there.
Great.
And they have this ambition to make net zero industrial park with clean energy. So that's why this batik bomba is special. I hope you like it.
It's great. Thank you for this awesome shirt. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. Elon, I know you are a hard worker. But with a lot of headlines that you make lately, if I were you, I would, jump on a plane and fly to Bali and kind of like hide a little bit or relax. Why don't you do that?
I mean, that sounds fantastic. But my workload has recently increased quite a lot. I mean, oh man, I have too much work on my plate, that is for sure.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Elephant in the room question, Elon. Of course, Twitter. First, how does it feel to be media mogul? Okay, noted.
It's a little uncomfortable.
Next question.
I'm sort of more like, is Twitter sort of media, but it's not exactly media. I mean, it is a medium as opposed to media. So it's but I mean, it's still speak because there's no way to make everyone happy. That's for sure.
I see. Now, Elon, we are Twitter nation, fourth largest in the world. A lot of millennials and Gen Z. Even President Jokowi has about 19 million followers. What is the future of Twitter for these developing countries, but already in G20, including the likes Brazil and India? Can you share a little bit?
I think Indonesia has an incredibly exciting, bright future because there's just so much youth and energy, and the population. I think a lot of people in the world don't realize that Indonesia has one of the world's highest populations of any country. So I think the combination of the youth, energy, large population, a lot of resources. I think the future is extremely exciting for Indonesia. So. Yeah, I'm I guess bullish on Indonesia, if you will. I think it's a very, very exciting, bright future.
So there was a thought, I think we interacted a little bit in Boca Chica about Twitter TV. Because over here, information is being disseminated using free-to-air TV antenna to 17,500 islands. Imagine user-generated content, short videos, trending topics. Is it a good idea or bad idea?
No, I think that's a great idea. Twitter for sure, I think needs to do a lot more on video, and it's kind of a no-brainer to enable a longer video on Twitter, and also enable content creators to make a living with content that they submit to Twitter. So. Twitter really needs to give a revenue share to content creators in order for them to make a living creating content and having that content be on Twitter.
Oh, great to hear that. Now, let's talk about Tesla. Now, the world is decoupling, Elon, as you know it, right? And of course, with the conflict, Russia-Ukraine, it will make it even worse. This decoupling also make the electric vehicle supply chain separated between the East and West. It looks like it. So they are making separate supply chain. Now, you are a global company, Tesla is, global customers, but gigafactories in China, Germany, and Austin that I thank you for hosting us in. How do you navigate through all of this?
I have to say it's with great difficulty. I mean, I'm really working at the absolute most amount that I can work from morning till night, 7 days a week. So this is not something I'd recommend, frankly. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, but it is. And I'm just looking at this video, and it's so bizarre.
Well, you look like you're in a dark place.
I'm sitting here in the dark, surrounded by candles.
I know. Yeah.
It's so bizarre.
So that's the beauty of being in equator, Elon.
Yeah.
When it's dark there, it's bright here.
Totally.
Hey, Elon, you know, Indonesia has this ambition to be electro state as opposed to petro state. In the past, petro state, but today, electro state, right?
Sure.
So we want to be the Saudi Arabia of decarbonization.
Great.
We have peatland, mangroves, tropical forests, carbon dioxide capture. We also have critical battery materials. We also have potential for renewable energy. How should Indonesia contribute to this stabilizing the EV ecosystem? In your view?
Well, I think Indonesia is making a significant contribution already with the production of critical ingredients for batteries. So nickel, as you mentioned, is a key ingredient in lithium-ion batteries, especially for long-range vehicles. A lot of times people hear the word like lithium-ion battery, but lithium is actually only a few % of the battery weight, whereas nickel is actually a majority of the battery weight in long-range vehicles, and which will also be essential for aircraft, which require a high energy density battery pack. So I think, and then Indonesia is also doing a lot of renewable energy generation. So the combination of sustainable mining, renewable energy generation, and just overall, sort of advancements in internet connectivity and education, I think Indonesia is going to make a great contribution to the world.
Oh, great, thank you. Now, a lot of developing countries are already in G20, like Indonesia, today hosting, and you have India, South Africa. Any thoughts about making a little bit more affordable but still good quality Tesla? Maybe we call it Model I, Indonesia, India?
I can't speak too much about the future Tesla product development, except to say that we do think that making a much more affordable vehicle would make a lot of sense, and we should do such a thing.
Oh, great to hear that. So let's go to SpaceX, Elon. So when we went to Boca Chica to see your facility, impressive facility, by the way, right? First, I have never been to Starbase, right? But I overheard some engineers saying that maybe the best place to launch these rockets are from the equator. So
yeah, it's true.
It's true, right?
Yeah,
Indonesia
actually,
has...
the best would be at like a really tall mountain at the equator.
Okay, mountains on the equator, got it. So Indonesia has 5,000 kilometers of equator, and in fact, our new capital is going to be on the equator.
Cool.
Should we be talking more about launching pads of SpaceX being in Indonesia? And maybe also you can launch some Starlinks. We need some connectivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think long term it would make a lot of sense to have launch platforms around the world. And I think you could actually even have a situation where you travel by rocket from one part of the world to the next, because then you can travel at over 20 times the speed of sound. So for a rocket can get to the complete other side of the world in 45 minutes, and half sort of to most places in about 20 minutes. So I think that this would really open up the world if you could travel conceivably, to anywhere in the world in less than an hour.
Yeah. By the way, Elon, over here in Indonesia, you are not called Elon Musk. You are called Mas Elon. Mas is brother.
Okay, cool.
Brother Elon.
Thank you.
So Mas Elon, we threw some questions on social media asking what would you ask Elon if you happen to see him, live. Right? And maybe you have heard this question, but why do you talk so much about sending people to Mars while probably more than half of the people on Earth still think that the world is flat?
Yeah, well, I think it's an exciting future if you can imagine like where we're a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species, and ultimately out there among the stars. And that's just, I find that to just be an incredibly exciting, inspiring future, and to think that one day that such things might happen. And the world, of course, will always have problems, and that we need to solve the problems of Earth. And I think 99% of our effort should be on solving the problems of Earth. And I think 1% of our effort should be on being a spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species, because that's just incredibly exciting and inspiring. And there need to be things. Life can't just be about solving problems. There've got to be things that inspire you and that make you glad to be alive and happy to wake up in the morning.
From SpaceX, going back to Earth. Boring Company, we had a chance to go to your facility in Las Vegas. Now, Indonesia and a lot of developing countries, and even developed countries, have a lot of traffic. Are you thinking to do projects of Boring Company in developing country cities, especially maybe using electric buses? So you can solve two things at the same time, traffic and CO2 emission.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like my joke about tunnels is that tunnels are underappreciated. I mean, it's not the best joke in the world, but I think the only answer that I can see for congestion in cities is tunnels. I think flying cars are, I think because of the fact that they generate a lot of noise and a lot of wind, and there's always some possibility that it will fall on your head, and it certainly would not be good for privacy if flying cars were flying over your house all the time. I think, on the other hand, that tunnels do not suffer from any of those issues, and so like you can think of flying cars as like 3D above ground, and tunnels are like 3D below ground. And we have some of our first tunnels with electric vehicles operating in them in Las Vegas. So I'd encourage anyone who visits Las Vegas to try them out. It sounds so simple, but electric vehicles in tunnels are absolutely an answer to the worst possible congestion of any city, because you can go as many layers of tunnels deep as you would like until the traffic congestion is addressed.
Great. Thank you. We're getting to the end of the interview, so I'm going to try to take advantage of it.
Sure.
The right questions to ask for the millennials and Gen Zs. We have 70% of the Indonesian population. They are in that category. What are the great questions to ask today, looking at the next 20 years? Because in 20 years, Elon, Indonesia wants to be in golden era in 2045, 100 years of the independence. What are great questions to ask?
You asked me what are the great questions to ask?
Yeah. What should be they ask? What they should be asking?
You think about that.
Well, we are not millennials and Gen Z, so that's okay, I guess.
Well, I think one of the questions to ask is, what future do you want? Like, what is the good future? I mean, I think one where civilization is growing and the scope and scale of consciousness are growing along with it is a great future. You know, obviously one where we transition to a sustainable energy, because, you know, the counterpoint is unsustainable energy. You know, the faster we can transition to a sustainable energy economy, the better. But we will transition to a sustainable energy economy. Just a question of how long it takes. And then I think just furthering human knowledge so we can understand the nature of the universe and our place in it and how we got here and, I don't know, the meaning of life. And as I said earlier, going and exploring other star systems, and maybe we'll find, you know, alien civilizations or discover alien civilizations that existed millions of years ago may no longer exist, but we see the ruins of ancient civilizations. I think that would be incredibly interesting, just to, you know, go out there and explore the galaxy.
I see. Thank you. And Bobby, the last question. You are a true global citizen, born and raised in South Africa, made it well in America, becoming global entrepreneurial hero. We are here in Southeast Asia. So what should the next, and maybe better, Elon Musk of the East be focusing on in the next 10 years? Because a lot of people in this room, they want to be Elon Musk of the East. Why not, right?
Well, I mean, I'd be careful what you wish for. I'm not sure how many people would actually like to be me. They would like to be what they imagine being me, which is not the same as actually being me. I mean, the amount that I torture myself is like next level, frankly. But I mean, I think like if anyone who does something like useful, like you know, builds products or provides services that are of use to our fellow human beings, is doing a good thing. You know, so that's I'll just say, like, maximize your usefulness and value to the rest of humanity. Yeah, I mean, that's it really. Yeah.
Well, Elon, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
And one more thing, Elon. When we started this session, we started with Elvis song. A little less conversation and a little bit more action, please. And you certainly have done that. Even in the middle of the night, you just put on candles to save energy. So thank you for appearing in front of us.
This is the funniest thing I've ever seen.
I'll see you soon.
All right, thank you so much, Pak Nindya Bakri, for the light and also meaningful conversation with Elon Musk. Actually, honestly, Elon and Pak Anin, I was wondering, was it real Elon Musk? But it was, yes, it was really Elon Musk, because the concept was in the dark. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a groovy night and I can show you how to use it. Come along with me and put your mind at ease. Hey, less conversation.
All right, so we got Elon Musk already. We got Mr. Chow, and it's really interesting what Elon Musk had to say earlier about Twitter, that he has also confirmed that creators, maybe many of you here are also content creators like myself, will be able to monetize their content on Twitter And there's a development as well. Maybe you have heard about this of $8 that accounts have to pay to get their accounts blue checked, or for those people who have blue check mark, they have to pay $8 per month. And Elon is also optimistic about the prospect of EV, especially in Indonesia. And it was really interesting when Pak Anindya asked about why sending people to Mars when many people on Earth still think that Earth is flat. And he said that, I find it to be a very interesting future. The world has always had problems that we need to fix. And life is not only about living life, but dream about something too, excited about something too, that makes us happy to wake up in the morning. That's really meaningful, and hopefully it will inspire many, many people here, especially the Gen Z. And a message for the Gen Z that he said was, what future do you want? That was really meaningful. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's now move on to the next session. We will have a keynote address from the Executive Chair of Bezos Earth Fund and Executive Chairman of Amazon. This is no less interesting, I guarantee, addressing the topic of balancing global economic growth and environmental protection. Please allow me to welcome Mr. Jeff Bezos.
Distinguished guests, excellencies, fellow business leaders, let me commend the Indonesian government for your leadership of the G20 and the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce for your leadership of the B20. We meet in complex and difficult times, facing the triple crisis of conflict, COVID, and climate. As business and government leaders, how should we approach the current situation? Let me suggest 3 principles that are helpful to me. First, let's learn from the achievements of the past. When I was born, the average person in the world lived 53 years. Today, the average person lives 73 years. World poverty rates in that time have fallen by 75%, and adult literacy has doubled. And even though the world population has grown greatly in that time, food production has risen even more rapidly. Technology advance has played a major role. The cost of solar power has fallen 99% since 1979, when President Jimmy Carter installed solar panels on the White House roof for the first time. Innovation, education, entrepreneurship, and better public policy are responsible for these gains. We've been confronting challenges since we've been writing history, and we humans have always found a way to rise above them. Second, success will require us to address immediate needs while also laying the foundation for a better long-term future. As governments and businesses address urgent problems of inflation, debt, and increased risk, it remains important to also keep our eyes on the enduring challenges addressing the climate and nature crises. Our planet's surface is made of astonishingly thin and fragile layers. I was reminded of this last year when I went into space with Blue Origin. I was told that seeing the Earth from space changes the lens through which you view the world, but I wasn't prepared for just how much that would be true. Looking back at Earth from up there, the atmosphere is so obviously thin, the world so finite and also so beautiful. Our atmosphere, vegetation, soils, and seas make life livable. Their beauty also makes life worth living. But they're being degraded, and at an alarming rate. The world is warming, the seas rising, storms intensifying. Our oceans are acidifying, and our fish stocks are declining. Soil is eroding, and deserts are encroaching. We know how to reverse these trends. Solutions require public, private, and citizen leadership. At the Bezos Earth Fund, we're working with others to monitor 50 key transitions that need to happen for us to address climate, nature, and development. These include phasing out internal combustion engines, decarbonizing steel and cement, raising food crop yields, reducing food loss, and empowering indigenous communities to manage tropical forests. For each of these factors, we try to identify how close they are to positive tipping points and what barriers we can help remove in order to cross these tipping points. This helps us decide how to allocate the $10 billion in grants that the Bezos Earth Fund will be making this decade, and we welcome others to join us in this approach. My final suggestion is this: let's not get stuck in the mindset of either-or thinking. Many business and government leaders would like to be bold in reducing environmental damage, but they fear it will raise costs and hurt growth. But we now know that smart action against climate change doesn't just stop bad things happening. It also can improve resource efficiency, drive new technology, reduce uncertainty, and lead to new opportunities. It is this new understanding that encouraged us to set up the Climate Pledge and set a goal to reach net zero carbon by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement goals. As part of this pledge, Amazon aims to power all its operations with 100% renewable energy by 2025, and is working to convert its delivery fleet to electric vehicles. Just yesterday, we announced an agreement with PLN for 210 megawatts of renewable energy across 4 utility-scale solar projects in Indonesia. This is a first-of-its-kind agreement in Indonesia. Amazon is inviting other companies to join the Climate Pledge, and 376 have done so to date. Working together with all of our combined human ingenuity, we will invent our way out of this box. We will protect this planet and improve economic growth and well-being. We will do both. Our human challenges are big, but by walking side by side, working together, our human capacity to solve them is even bigger. Don't lose faith, and never ever let anyone tell you it's impossible. Thank you.
It was also interesting and inspiring as well from Mr. Jeff Bezos, 3 principles that he holds dearly and he has believed in. First, learn from the achievement of the past, ladies and gentlemen, as you heard before, in terms of life expectancy, number of poverty, and this is our aim. The cost of solar power has fallen 90% since 1979, since the installment in the White House, and that makes us optimistic that solar power, solar panel will be much cheaper now and in the future. We've been confronting challenges since we've been writing history, he said, but we've always found ways to rise above them. Jeff Bezos also mentioned that success requires us to address immediate needs, but also lay the foundation for better long-term future. And it's really interesting as well that he pointed out about the collaboration between Amazon and PLN. PLN is Indonesia's electricity company for 210 megawatt of renewable energy across 4 utilities scale solar projects in the country. All right, let's now move on to the next agenda, ladies and gentlemen. We will hear a keynote address to lay the foundation of our next panel discussion under the topic of how public-private partnership can accelerate transformative economic growth. And now please allow me to welcome to the stage the head of Nusantara Capital City Authority. Please welcome Mr. Bambang Susantono.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, honorables, ladies and gentlemen. I see here also the chairwoman of Business 20, Ibu Sinta Kamdani. Congratulations so far, Ibu. A very good day to all of you who is joining us in the sessions, and it is a great pleasure for me to join here at this Business 20 Summit. And allow me first to convey my gratitude to the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce, Kadin, as the host of this event. Let me open the discussion today by stating a point that is, I believe that all of us in this room agree with, that infrastructure development is key to economic growth in developing countries in particular. Infrastructure provides a more level playing field opens up opportunities to increase prosperity and lift more people out of poverty. In fact, this is the underlying reasons why for Indonesia to embark on the bold task of creating a new national capital, Nusantara. The decision to move our capital is a major effort to create an inclusive and equal economic growth in Indonesia by providing a new center of gravity for economic activity. This is critical because cities and their infrastructure are one of the key drivers of a country's economic growth, and new city development can act as an important backbone of the local, regional, and national economies, as it provides social and economic benefits to society. When we talk about the cities, we are reminded on the fact that countries need to prepare for massive urbanizations. Take Asia as an example. More than half of the population in Asia will be moving to cities by the mid-21st century. That is about 120,000 people per day, which equal 20,000 new dwellings, 250 kilometers of road, and 6 million liters of clean water that need to be built or provided every day for the next 28 years. The fact alone highlights the massive needs for infrastructure in Asia. A calculation from the Asian Development Bank several years ago suggests that this region will require around $1.7 trillion per year until 2030 to build the needed infrastructure. We need to be mindful that the number was calculated before the COVID-19 pandemic. Certainly, the infrastructure needs post-pandemic will be bigger as government now realize the need to build infrastructures that are resilient against not only financial and climate crisis, but also the health shock. Overall, the government in Asia can only supply about 60% of the required amount to build such infrastructure. Thus, the involvement of private sector is essential, and this opportunity is opened by the public-private partnership, or PPP. But generally, a much wider implementation of PPP has been hampered by a lack of champions and of capacity to push through these precedent-setting projects. Honorable distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in my view, there are three critical issues that need to be addressed to get PPPs on track. One, securing the right knowledge and skills. Two, improving the investment climate. And three, better project preparations. Let's talk about the first issue, the need to have the right people. Sometimes I also like to say that PPP is an acronym for procuring professional people. These people could be government officials with a strong vision to lay the groundwork for PPPs, or they could also be technical experts who make the projects happen on the ground. In particular, the expertise to appraise, manage, and deliver successful PPPs is crucial. Thankfully, there have been efforts to upskill people involved in PPPs. Some global and regional skills accreditation programs are available, as well as some PPP basic training to ensure a common minimum level of knowledge and understanding amongst practitioners. Having such a standard will help provide guidance for obtaining resources with better consistency. The second factor I wanted to touch upon was the investment climate. I hope the distinguished panel can later share the latest situation on PPP investment environments around the world. But I can briefly note some encouraging development in Indonesia. Overall, there has been relatively good progress on a PPP-friendly legal and regulatory framework. There is also a good range of enabling instruments, which include an infrastructure fund for investment, a guarantee fund, a viability gap fund, and a project development facility. This indicates the government's strong commitment to accelerating private sector participation in infrastructure development and investment. The third and the last point on project preparation is probably the most important of all three, and that gives yet another acronym for PPP, which means properly prepared projects. It is fair to say that our region's infrastructure demand does not have a matching large pipeline of bankable deals. And this is the biggest hurdle to seeing more private investment into infrastructure. I hope the panel can explore this element further, but from my experiences, generally government often struggle with the investment upfront in the knowledge, expertise, and process that is needed to properly prepare projects or PPP. As such, we believe having better skills backed with a good climate for the PPP, as I mentioned earlier, can significantly help to increase the number of bankable and sustainable projects. Another related factor that should be considered is to build good and strong PPP centers, which can act as the lead agency for facilitating the PPP's development in the country. Lastly, countries should actively tap into available resources provided by international development agencies, many of which provide PPP advisory service to governments, and with their regional experiences, these agencies can also be a good source of best practices in public-private transactions in other countries, and this can be further strengthen the capacity of countries' authority. Honorable distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me now briefly update you on Nusantara development that is relevant to our discussion today. Only 20% of Nusantara development will come from the state budget. The remaining 80% will come from various sources. For this, we welcome contributions from private sector, including through public-private partnership, which can be user payment or availability payment schemes, with the government can provide guarantee, partial construction support, or viability gap fund. I'd like to note that the development of Nusantara will closely follow the principle of the ESG, environment, social, and governance. So Nusantara will also be attractive to investors who are keen to make sustainable investment. I'm also pleased to update you that the government is finalizing a government regulation, peraturan pemerintah, that will provide a set of special incentives for investing in Nusantara. This will provide provision of tax holidays, special super tax deduction schemes, and others. I can assure you that the level of incentive that we will offer in Nusantara will be the best incentive in Indonesia. To facilitate business transactions in Nusantara, the government is forming a business entity that will be fully owned by the authority. This enterprise will represent us in commercial ventures, including in managing PPP transactions, and is designed to expedite business-to-business or B2B dealing with the private sector. Honorable distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in summary, I hope you agree with me that infrastructure development challenges are also opportunities. With better skill, a good investment climate, and strong project preparation, we can build the infrastructure we all need to drive the growth. I would like to close by noting that PPPs are not a silver bullet. The partnership should be a core component of a holistic plan to overhaul national infrastructure. We should remain focused on the primary goal of providing quality infrastructure as the key to economic growth and also prosperity, and I'm looking forward to the active participations from every one of us to bring us closer to this goal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Pak Bambang, for the updates and also your inspiration about PPP. Mr. Bambang Susantono is the head of Nusantara Capital City Authority, as the president targets that in 2024, the new capital city of Indonesia called Nusantara will start its operation. It is now in the process of moving the capital from Jakarta to East Kalimantan, and we call the new capital as Nusantara. And earlier, Pak Bambang also mentioned that the moving of Indonesian capital city from Jakarta to Nusantara in East Kalimantan is a major effort to create inclusive and equal economic growth, which is not Western Indonesian centered or Jakarta centered or Java centered, but inclusive and equal economic growth. And involvement of the private sector is super important. One of the examples is the development of Nusantara itself, and he also highlighted about the keys to putting PPP on track, which are securing right knowledge and skill, improving investment climate, and enhancing project preparation. Therefore, he also mentioned that PPP is not only about public-private partnership, but also about providing professional people and properly prepared projects. While we're still waiting for the set for the next panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen, let me update you with our schedule after the break later, that we're going to also take a listen to what Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, in her capacity as UN Secretary General Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, has to say, as well as actress Anne Hathaway in her capacity as UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, speaking about unlocking the full potential of women in the economy. And still talking about Nusantara, though, it is really interesting as well about the update that Mr. Bambang Susantono has shared to us, that Nusantara Funding Scheme, 20% of the budget comes from the government budget, only 20%, and 80% are from other sources, which are public-private partnership, company participation, international financing, and creative financings. And it is a great privilege for Indonesia to update this in front of many business leaders, international business community, that everyone is welcome to participate and collaborate, in which doing business in Nusantara, Pak Bambang divided into two terms, in which under the draft government regulation on investing in Nusantara, there will be tax holiday for investment, tax holiday for office relocation, special treatment on customs and excise, special tax treatment for financial center, and special treatment for value-added tax. All right, now the set is ready, and we're ready to move forward to the next panel discussion. The topic of the next panel discussion is how public-private partnership can accelerate transformative economic growth. I would like to invite the moderator and panelists to please come up on stage. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Andrew Staples, The Economist Impact from The Economist Impact, Mr. Paul Pullman, co-author of Net Positive, Alvaro Pereira, OECD G20 Deputy Finance and Acting Chief Economist, Bruce Armstrong, Group Chief Executive Officer at Aspen Medical, R. Dinesh, Executive Vice Chairman of TVS Supply Chain Solutions Ltd, and last but not least, Ms. Natalie Black, His Majesty's Trade Commissioner of the United Kingdom. To Mr. Andrew Staples, please take it away.
Good morning still. Delighted to be with you today. My name is Andy Staples. I head up the Policy and Insights team at Economist Impact, which is the Research and Insights division of the Economist Group. Very happy to be here today to discuss this theme with my esteemed panel. It has been estimated that G20 countries will face perhaps a $10.6 trillion US funding gap for infrastructure by 2040, given current trajectories. As we heard in the keynotes this morning, public-private partnerships, or PPP, will be pivotal in closing the gap, as is the need for both businesses and governments to co-pilot economic growth and accelerate the transition to more sustainable futures. However, PPP schemes are often held back by unclear regulations or allocation of risk and responsibilities. These challenges need to be overcome, and the key questions for us today is how we can do that. To get us underway, I would first like, however, to take a step back and consider the role of PPPs that PPPs have played over the past 2 decades. And I'm delighted to call on Alvaro Pereira from the OECD to give us some context and insights about their understanding of PPPs. Alvaro, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, obviously, we are talking about huge funding gap that we have. We just heard a very important project here in Indonesia, but all around the world. Many countries are facing with the issue, how can they boost investment at the same time they're able to provide some sort of goods and services to their populations. One of the things that we've seen over the past few years, exactly in terms of infrastructure, in the areas of port investment, airports, and hospitals, and many other areas, many countries have used PPPs as a complement to provide public goods. This is quite important because public investment has been dropping quite significantly across almost every country of the world, not in every single one of them, but it's been a very general trend. And so very often PPPs are coming into the fold to try to complement and try to boost investment in these countries. So how have countries designed these PPPs? Well, as I said, especially in terms of projects, big infrastructure projects, or projects in which they are dedicated to certain areas like hospitals, very often you need to have first a strong and clear regulatory framework. So we just heard, in fact, this is something that you are doing here in Indonesia. This is very important because obviously if you don't have a good regulatory framework, you might not be able to attract the investment that you need to do this project. So strong, clear, transparent regulatory framework, I think, is very important. Secondly, it's very important to share risks for sure, but also thinking that basically PPPs are basically a financial tool, not necessarily the way that you're going to make the growth more inclusive or innovative. You know, as I said, this is a tool, financing tool for you to do this type of projects. But what we've seen also around the world is that besides the strong regulatory framework, it's very important that governments around the world are able to provide units to make sure that PPPs also are sustainable. One of the problems that we learned from some countries in the last 2 decades is that sometimes countries are not careful enough in the regulatory front or in the budgetary front. And you create contingent liabilities that afterwards can plague these projects and plague the governments. We just had, in the last 10 years, some countries, especially in Southern Europe, in which PPPs, because there was not a strong regulatory framework, there was contingent liabilities that then afterwards came back to haunt them. So it's very important to have a clear, as I said, transparent framework. At the same time, get the incentives right. We just heard from Indonesia, very strong tax incentives, very strong regulatory incentives for the companies to feel attracted and feel welcome to the country. And again, to bet in some areas that I think are crucial needs for the country is key. So roads, airports, ports, all those areas can be quite important. And obviously, probably just to end up very quickly, you know, one of the big areas that we're going to see going forward is exactly the green transition. And so this is an area in which, for sure, the private sector and the partnerships between the private and public sector will be crucial for us to match the funding gap that we need to accomplish. Thank you.
Adora, thank you very much, and for highlighting the role of government there, particularly around creating the regulatory framework and an attractive investment environment. But Paul, if I could come to you, the other side of that coin is business. And what do you see as the role for businesses to get involved with PPP, and what is the current state of play?
Well, the role of business is enormous, as you can understand. Society wouldn't function without business, the financing, the resources, the innovations, and that's increasingly clear. And I think embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals that run from 2015 to 2030 with a simple objective of irreversibly eradicating poverty and doing that in a more sustainable and equitable way. The 17 goals, 169 targets, I think 85–90% of them recognize the role of business. I always say business cannot succeed in societies that fail, nor can business be a bystander in a system that gives them life in the first place. And what we see currently is an enormous gap emerging, even more so after COVID, between what is needed to achieve these sustainable development goals and what we're actually putting in, individually and collectively. Part of that reflects a broken multilateral system. Part of that reflects an inertia on the side of business. So we need to, a part of that reflects really a lack of funding that flows into that direction. So these are the issues that we need to address individually and collectively, and it's in our interest to do that, to be honest. Now, if you look at the business community, recognizing that the multilateral situation is difficult, that governments have a hard time taking care of what they are elected for, we just have to step up and fill that void. My argument has always been very simple. We benefited from reasonably good governance in the world and built enormously successful businesses. I did with Unilever and being in every country in the world. But when they fall short a little bit, we have to fill that void. And unfortunately, the reality is this audience probably being the exception, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But if you look on a macro level, very few businesses are willing to engage with governments. For example, in the US, where the numbers are more readily available, it's less than 6% of CEOs that say they want to engage with governments. Now, if you look at business people themselves in their business models, very few are also willing to engage with other partners, even in their own value chains. 80% of companies still haven't made commitments beyond scope 1 and 2. Scope 3, for example, which is your value chain, has probably 80% of the carbon emissions. And the reason we're not moving forward at the speed, I think, is because companies define their responsibilities a little bit too narrowly. So the reality is, if we want to make this world better, we have to close that financing gap, which is estimated to be $3 to $5 trillion. That financing gap is going up. It's not going down, unfortunately. If you look at the combined ODAs of governments, you talk $150 billion. That big gap needs to be filled by business. Business needs to step up. It's the most important message. What does that mean at the end of the day? I think in most cases, we actually know what needs to be done. We have the technology. On a global level, we have more money than we know what to deal with, to be honest. So how can we now muster, if you want to, the leadership to make that possible? This is not an issue in the end of the day of climate change or inequality or food security. These are symptoms of our failures. The main issue that we have to address, frankly, is greed, apathy, selfishness. And that has crept into the private business world, if you want to, as well. The famous Milton Friedman shareholder short-term myopic focus. And we've done very well to create an enormous group of leaders that are willing to, or that are able to practice that enormously, but it's not benefiting us anymore. So what we are arguing in our book is very simple. When you've overshot the planetary boundaries to the extent that we have, we're living well beyond our planetary boundaries. At the same time, we need to create an enormous opportunity for development in still about 80% of the world. The numbers simply don't add up. We need to do things differently. So the very simple question we ask in our book is, how can companies profit from solving the world's problems, not creating the world's problems? And how can you ensure that as a company that the presence in this world of your company makes this, makes this a better world, yes or no? And what we see finally is that companies that are positioning themselves very well are companies that first and foremost take responsibility of their total impact in the world, all consequences intended or not, beyond scope 1 and 2. These are companies that run the longer-term multi-stakeholder business models, hence the partnerships. These are companies that see shareholder value as a result. They need it, they understand that, but they see it as a result of what they do. And last but not least, these are companies that are involved in the broader systems changes that society needs. Optimizing within a current system that isn't designed to deliver anymore only brings you so far. And it's that latter aspect that we need to step up individually and collectively.
Thank you very much for bringing that sort of personal leadership aspect of this in there as well, and to echo Klaus Schwab from this morning, that stakeholder capitalism is a crucial context for us to operate in. We're going to get to industry leaders in a second, but Natalie, if I could come to you as His Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific. The UK was a very early user of the PPP mechanism over the past 2 or 3 decades, but how is that informing the role that you have at the moment, and particularly around trade and investment from the UK?
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good morning, everyone. It seems particularly apt to be talking about public-private partnerships at the B20. This is exactly what we are doing here, and Ibu Shinta, my good friends at CADIN, thank you very much for the way that you've convened us so successfully here. So public-private partnerships. I think the habit is to emphasize the finance aspect of it. That is incredibly important. We've already heard about the huge gap in infrastructure financing, particularly in Asia. So ADB assesses there's around a 2 trillion gap a year. Now the UK is working to try and be part of a contributing factor to address that, particularly here in Indonesia, where through our UK Export Finance Agency, we have £4 billion available for those companies that want to work together on addressing issues. And having just heard around the movement of the capital city, we have a number of British companies who are contributing to those efforts. So finance is absolutely key. But I think quite often we focus on the dichotomy of the public versus private, and even, Andrew, if I may say, as part of this panel, there's the private and then the public over here. But actually, for me, the key word is partnership. Yeah. That's what delivers a successful PPP. I've seen that in the UK and I've seen that across the region. Now, what does that mean in practice? I think it's absolutely key to listen to your stakeholders, whether that's the local community, as we've just been hearing, whether that's the local businesses that you want to benefit, particularly MSMEs in this part of the world, but of course, big corporations. What does that look like in practice? Just to give you a very tangible example, we worked with the Indonesian government on access to the education market here. And in 2019, the Indonesian government changed the regulations so companies from overseas can invest in the education market. And later this month, we will have 14 universities from the UK who will come to Indonesia to find opportunities to start setting up their own degree programs and build capacity here. So Glasgow's coming, Warwick's coming, Exeter's coming. So incredibly tangible opportunities, but based on listening to the market and finding ways to evolve those partnerships over time that recognize that nothing is static here. So even just going back to UK export finance, which I just mentioned, at COP27, we're the first country to install new clauses in our contracts, which will mean that if you're a low-income country or if you're an island country that experience a significant climate shock, we will delay your repayment. So we are very proud of UKEF, but we have to keep evolving it over time. And we have to keep listening to what the market and what stakeholders want. So for me, even as a representative of the public on this panel, it is absolutely all about the partnership.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to now bring the focus on to our business friends here as well. Bruce, at Aspen Medical, you've been involved in PPP projects around the world, not least here in Indonesia and Fiji, the Middle East and elsewhere. Listening to our colleagues here on the panel, could you give us some sense of your experiences of what's worked well and why, and particularly around that issue of partnership?
Yeah, thanks very much, Andrew. And I'm going to start to answer your question by asking the B20 audience just to consider some words. So, health systems, jobs, investment, economy, growth. Now, they're just words until they're all brought together. And all of those are inextricably linked to a successful public-private partnership health infrastructure projects. Today, I just wanted to, in answering your question, just touch on the value that the private sector brings and also the importance of positive government engagement. And then I'll just very briefly touch on 3 public-private partnerships that we're doing around the world at the moment. So first of all, the value that the private sector brings. So clearly, we come along with our own intellectual property, our knowledge capital, and innovation, but I'll talk about innovation is not only in the way that we deliver. There is innovation in the way that we are going to bring finance to those particular projects, and that's really important in getting them going. We also bring all of our experience to these public-private partnerships in capacity building, in these nation-building projects, I would term them, that we're doing. And that leads me on to the importance, the second point, the engagement with the government. That we heard our other speakers speak about the importance of partnership with government, and I couldn't overstate that. These successful PPPs start with that engagement with the government and the vision that they might bring. You know, we've heard some fantastic speakers over the last 2 days. But I thought, for me, the one that really resonated was the Minister for Health, Minister Budi. And he spoke about the importance of health infrastructure projects and being not just, and he totally understood, it was investment coming into the economy, and that meant jobs, improved tourism, and that helps the economy. And we support that, and that's why we're investing in Indonesia in a project for over $1 billion USD. So very important, that engagement with the government. Just touching on a couple of 3 examples of public-private partnerships that we're doing around the world at the moment. First one with the government of Fiji. That is a very traditional build, operate, transfer, where we competed on a competitive tender and were selected by the government of Fiji, working in consultation with the International Finance Corporation and the World Bank. And in that one, where we are delivering on 2 hospitals, 305 beds at Lautoka and 70 beds at Bar Hospital. And it very quickly became apparent in our partnership with the government of Fiji that this wasn't just about the health system. Of course it was about the health system, improving that for the people of Fiji, but it was about the economy. It was about making the tourists feel confident that they could go to Fiji and get international world-class standard. And we're on that journey with the government of Fiji, and I'm really pleased to report that only a couple of weeks ago I visited Fiji and was witness to the first continuous capability around heart surgery in Fiji, and was able to even stand at the door of the ICU and get the thumbs up from patient number 1, whose life was saved by that public-private partnership that is going on between ourselves and the government of Fiji. Second one I'd touch on is the government of Abu Dhabi and the Department of Health. They have a very clear master plan on how they're developing health in Abu Dhabi, and we're part of that. We're delivering super clinics, I'd call them, across the underserved areas of Abu Dhabi. We've got 3 of those complete and open, and the next 3 will be open before the end of December. And they've had that vision on how they're going to improve their health system in that country, and we're really pleased and honoured to be playing a part of that. And the final one, but definitely not the most important, the least important, is the one here in Indonesia. The governor of West Java had a very clear vision that he wanted to improve the health system across Java, West Java. 50 million people in West Java. And we're really honoured that we've been invited to be part of that and working closely with him in doing so. Over the fullness of time, the project will be 23 hospitals and 650 clinics of various sorts across West Java. That's going to be in excess of a $1 billion USD investment in that project. And our estimate is that that'll be 50,000 jobs in West Java. And these are important not only for the health system, but I'm sure you can all acknowledge for the economy as well. I'd just like to conclude and maybe summarise by saying that this engagement with the government is extremely important, but I'm looking out, this is the B20, and I'm putting out a challenge to everyone here who's in business that we have this opportunity to do good for the world. Please consider how you're going to do that, and don't just say, well, we might do, we might not. You've got a chance, we've all got a chance to do better for the world and to take us on this journey, government, private sector, together. Thank you.
Bruce, thank you very much for bringing some of that to life. Dinesh, if I could come to you as well and get a sense of your interaction with PPPs in India, in the UK, but also perhaps if you could speak to that issue of transferring or sharing knowledge and innovation and how that can inform the partnerships that you've been involved with.
Thank you, and a pleasure to be here. I think for me, PPP actually means, if I can say so, the improving the quality of life and the ease of living. And obviously that is going to result in growth. If I first start with the India example, I think if I looked at first the hard infrastructure, and I mean by that the ports and the roads, etc., I think they have been very successful in creating not just great infrastructure, but also entrepreneurs who have come out and have now created an opportunity to create value and wealth for future generations as well. And that has worked because in a way the funding has been unbundled from the service provision. And as you go down that path, I think there is a great opportunity for which we can learn to see how we can proceed forward to that, and maybe I will cover that if we have an opportunity later. But the second part is what I would call as a utilization of that infrastructure. And I think the biggest challenge when we look at the returns from this investment, which is where I think many PPPs have had challenges, has been on what I would call the frugality with which we approach this. The utilization and the mapping of the data which come out of it. And that has been our experience, where especially we have been working with the UK government or UK government arms in terms of whether it be the defense or it be the NHS during COVID period, in terms of making sure we are able to get real-time information flow of what do we need to do to make the PPP more successful. To not just share data, but also work on the data and create the solutions so that we do not really have a time lag between that and cost. So for me, the way I would look at it would be that PPPs will be successful first if we have the goal in mind, which is to make sure that we are bettering the quality of life. Second is that we unbundle the solution. Third is we look at it from how do we utilize the assets to the best of the knowledge, and as I said, we can talk about more examples. But the best and the most important fact is how do we make sure data is available real time? How do we utilize that data to work on it? I would call it a review mechanism, a feedback mechanism is done so that we can actually improve the utilization of that. Because every project ultimately has to give a return, whether it be, as I said, you can measure it in two ways. One is better quality of life, or other is a financial return which it provides to the players who are going to be involved in that. And that's what I think we have been working on, or we have learned from working with governments like the UK, where they have been very proactive in terms of allowing us to have the access to the data and usage of the data real time, managing the utilization better.
Thank you very much. Alvira, I'd like to come back to you and think about sort of ideal partnerships and what we've looked like. We've heard about some of the challenges, we've heard about some best practice, but if you look out over the OECD, what are some of the steps that you would encourage governments and the private sector to be taking, to be focusing on?
Well, I think the key is certainly the word partnership, as we heard before, and opportunities for both sides. I think that's certainly very important. But remember, on the government side, I think PPPs can, if there's not a strong regulatory framework, can create some sort of risks, especially to government budgets when basically when they are used, these PPPs are used to circumvent budgetary constraints. It could happen, and so this is not ideal. However, I think an ideal partnership between the public and the private sector, I think it's very important that the public debt accounting standards are set, but also that PPPs are recorded as public debt and do not create discontinuous liabilities. So very often what governments do to make sure that this doesn't happen, we create the PPP unit in the Ministries of Finance, so to make sure that everything is transparent and according to plans. And I think it's quite important to go forward with the strong PPP framework. Also, remember, PPPs very often are important, especially when there's not, the economic context don't change dramatically, whereas, for example, when demand does not change dramatically. For example, for airports, for ports, or for the green transition, as I mentioned before. But also, I think it's very important that the optimal risk allocation is in this type of projects must be driven by the nature of the project and not by the choice of the private financing option. I think this is quite important. And obviously, sound procurement procedures for large infrastructure projects, I think this is quite important. In terms of ideal partnerships, a good ideal partnership for the future would be certainly in this green transition part, besides all the areas that we mentioned before. Because we're talking about, right now, the key when we're facing our major global financial and energy crisis, a global energy crisis, the key is right now on energy security, but in the medium to long term, the key is going to be energy security is going to be akin to investing in the green transition. So this will be a great opportunity to develop some sort of framework. Just to give you an idea, we estimate right now we are investing about $1 trillion every year in terms of green financing. So that means, in order to do the transition, you need to invest in grids, you need to invest in new infrastructure, you need to invest in huge infrastructure projects or smaller. But by 2030, we estimate that this has been tripled every year. So that means that there will be huge opportunities. The funding gap will be there because the public sector will not be able to provide this sort of amounts, and so that's why the partnership that we're just talking about here in this area is going to be key. In order to have a better planet, in order to have a more sustainable future, this is an area where developing sound PPPs would be very important, and a good regulatory framework will be very important so that we are able to also go towards a future that is brighter for all of us, especially we address the huge challenge of carbon mitigation.
Now, Natalie, I'd like to come back to you because we're hearing about the great opportunities that are there, and I think we can understand that. But when you're talking to the private sector about some of the projects that you're involved with, what are some of their concerns? What's holding them back, and how can you get them over those concerns?
Thanks, Andrew. I think it's a really good question. And this discussion is incredibly important because at the end of the day, to deliver a just energy transition, there is no way that we can't pursue public-private partnerships. We have so many examples of business and of government trying to go it alone on various different issues, and it just doesn't work. And actually, they receive significant blowback and end up being in a worse position. So I think the challenge is the right one. How do we design public-private partnerships that are going to be effective and deliver the sustainable growth that we are all looking for? I am His Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific. I am responsible for our trade and investment across 15 markets in the region. So I see a huge amount of diversity of feedback from businesses operating in the region. But the number one piece of feedback I always hear when it comes to delivering the outcomes that businesses want to see is transparency. Really understanding what is going on in markets, what are the demands, what do customers want to see, and then for the construct of public-private partnerships, how are they actually going to work in practice? And this is across a whole range of issues. So we've been talking about data, for example, a real hot topic in this part of the world. Big debate about data localization, not just here, but across the region. To have effective public-private partnerships, what is the role of data in that? What does it mean for the data localization debate? Huge question. What's the funding model return? What are the expectations in terms of the longevity of the deal? The fact is the biggest opportunity for PPPs in this region is infrastructure. So you are talking about very long time horizons, and that's something that we all have to get comfortable with. And that comes back to the transparency point, being really upfront about the long-term investment that is required. Again, the capital city example is a very, very good one because British companies involved, the Tony Blair Institute, Arup, they all know that that is a long-term project. So I think transparency is a core theme for getting PPPs right. That's what companies want to see, and particularly in the area of data, given the big digital demands in this part of the world, but also being realistic about the timelines of financial returns.
Thank you. We're just into our last 5 minutes, so I'm going to be really quick, but I'd like to hear from Dinesh and Bruce and Paul to come to you for a final comment and a call to action, I think. Dinesh, we're just hearing there about transparency. You were also talking about data. What else would be the number one success factor to focus on?
I think it's an ability to build a quick consortium around the best service providers in each category and bring them together. And I think the one other key factor which maybe we are forgetting, yes, infrastructure has to be built up, but if we are going to be meeting the kind of sustainability goals or the kind of new age thinking which has happened, I think there will be two soft infrastructure which will really require support, which will be the digital infrastructure, and if I can say so, the support for kind of the electrification or the green hydrogen which is going to happen. So as we look at, so to say, this overall portfolio, what can we make better? I think it has got to be a complete partnership approach, not just with government and businesses, but government and businesses working together in terms of not just infrastructure management, but utilization of that.
And Bruce, same question to you, drawing on your experiences, what would be the number one thing for you to share for your colleagues in the private sector when they're thinking about PPPs?
Yeah, so based on the experience we've got around the world on PPPs, you've got to start with a framework clearly of an agreement that has clearly defined responsibilities for all parties that are involved. But my key point is once you get into delivering, once you get into operationalising those contracts, there's got to be strong engagement and goodwill on both sides to make it work, because without that, then you hit significant roadblocks and the project is in danger.
Paul, I'd like to come to you. Earlier on in the conference, we were hearing a lot about the importance of trust, and trust is going to underpin these partnerships, as is transparency, and all the other best practice that we've been hearing. You were challenging, I think, the business community to step up and realise this opportunity and to be thinking more about their role in society with a broader set of stakeholders. I wondered if you could just have a final comment to our audience and here and beyond.
Well, final comment on trust would be very clear, because trust is probably the ultimate currency that we need to work together, because it is about aligned objectives. It is about a belief that you deliver your added value and I will deliver my added value. It is about trust that you hold each other accountable and responsible. And what you see in the world right now, in Greta Thunberg's terms, is a lot of blah, blah, blah. But frankly, that is actually true. If you ask companies, all the commitments they make, what they actually do is a huge gap. There's no question about it. Many sign up blindly for the net zero 2050 because that's sort of the popular thing to do, to be invited to these events. But then the actions behind that are missing to a great extent for many companies, not the exceptions that are undoubtedly in the room here. And if you ask employees, for example, do you see what the CEOs or the leaders of this company say? Do you actually see it implemented in your companies? You have a gap of 30, 40 percentage points all over the world when you do that. And that obviously undermines your own workforce, your engagement scores with them, your employer brand. So these things are important, that we walk the talk and talk the walk. And that is probably the most important thing with trust. Now, what we have here is a bigger issue, which is trust that we as business community have with society. It's a contract of trust. When we put the goal number 17 in the Sustainable Development Goals, that was deliberately underpinning all the other 16 goals, which was a goal of partnership. But it wasn't a contractual partnership of you do this and sign a contract and I do this. No, it's a partnership for humanity. A partnership where we understand that if we put ourselves to the interest of others, we would be better off itself as well. A partnership where values like equity, like dignity and respect, like compassion for everybody is in there. It really starts with that. The famous African proverb, if we want to go fast, we go alone. If we want to go far, we go together, really boils down to this. And what business now needs to do, I think, is not only in order to gain that trust, to get where we want to be, not only deliver on their promises or step up in many of the cases to do that, but also be part of the broader issues that need to be solved. We have a tremendous issue now in the functioning of multilateral institutions. Organizations like the ICC getting involved. How do you make the IMF or the World Bank or the WTO, how you make that work? We have a tremendous gap in development financing. How can we step up and help give these governments courage that we actually can find more development financing? We have a absence of markets for things like natural capital. For countries like Indonesia, enormously important. How can we move away from these very opaque voluntary markets to really put the right schemes and regulations in place to make it work? Business really has a role to play there. And I could go on to many of the other parts. Just came from Sharm el-Sheikh. The world commits 100 billion on climate financing for loss and damage, but has as best given, after many, many years of negotiations, 80 billion. Many would argue the real numbers are 20 billion. How can we as business step up and say, make your commitments come true, so that when you do that, we are actually built that trust on which we can build other things. So speak up, be part of the efforts to change our global systems, go beyond your comfort zone. I very simply say to CEOs, if you don't take responsibility of your total impact, you're missing a point. And I know it's uncomfortable. If you set targets that you can get away with, which you know that are not enough, then you're doing a disservice to the world. Set targets that make you feel uncomfortable. Set targets that science demands you to. And when you find out that when you set these targets that are making you feel uncomfortable, for which you don't have all the answers, it automatically brings you to these partnerships to try to solve them. The companies that do that increasingly are starting to think net positive, that think regenerative, restorative, reparative, that are part of these bigger transformations, are increasingly doing better in the marketplace and actually are valued more, interestingly, by the financial market. So here you have a choice as companies. Either you become net positive and position yourself very well to the future, or you continue to deny that and are heading at an increasing pace to the graveyard of dinosaurs. Make your choice.
Thank you very much. I think a very clear call to action there. And just to pick up on one point there, match words with actions. And I think on that point, I'd like to invite all of you to thank our panel for all of their thoughts and insights today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Staples, thank you very much, and all the speakers, thank you very much for sharing your insights. Ladies and gentlemen, that session actually concludes our session for this morning, and before we continue, you may enjoy the delicacies that we have provided at the Singaraja Hall. Once again, food and delicacies are provided at the Singaraja Hall for your lunch, though we kindly request for you to be back in the main hall by 2 p.m. as we will have many inspiring sessions later on. At 2 p.m., ladies and gentlemen, please return to the main hall as we will have many interesting sessions, one of which is from the Minister of State for Foreign Trade of the United Arab Emirates, and also the signing ceremony of $2 billion of green EV fund to invest in the end-to-end value chain of the EV ecosystem across sectors. And we would also like to thank our sponsors without whom this event wouldn't be possible. PT Astra International Tbk, PT Bayan Resources Tbk, PT Indika Energi Tbk, Sinarmas, April Group, Bakri Group, PT Bank Sentral Asia Tbk, PT Bank Negara Indonesia Persero Tbk, PT Elang Mahkota Teknologi Tbk, PT GoTo Gojek Tokopedia Tbk, PT HM Sampurna Tbk, Indonesia Financial Group, PT Indofood Sukses Makmur Tbk, Lipo Group, Permata Bank, PT Pertamina Persero, PT Sawit Sumber Masarana Tbk, PT Telekomunikasi Indonesia Persero Tbk, PT Virtue Dragon Nickel Industrial Park. Thank you also to Adaro Indonesia, Jarum Foundation, and PT Grab Teknologi Indonesia. And I would like to update you with some information for delegates who are joining the B20 Summit dinner later at Taman Bagawan. We will together depart at 6 p.m. from the East Lobby. We will depart together at 6 p.m. from the East Lobby. East Lobby is located at the photo wall and also the red carpet. It's located in front of those two, in front of the photo wall and also red carpet from the East Lobby. And also, please bring your B20 Summit ID for entrance. So we will see you at 2 p.m.
di hari kedua B20 Summit Indonesia ini. Dan tadi seperti yang teman kumparan saksikan, ada berbagai narasumber yang dihadirkan. Ada Elon Musk secara virtual juga yang hadir dalam panel diskusi di hari kedua ini. Kemudian nantinya masih ada beberapa panel diskusi lainnya menuju penutupan untuk B20 Summit Indonesia ini. Seperti yang diinformasikan sebelumnya, juga akan ada Anne Hathaway meski lewat virtual juga. Kemungkinannya nanti kita akan pantau bersama bagaimana jalannya panel diskusi. Dan kita akan mengupdate bagaimana situasi dan kondisi yang ada di venue atau di main hall dari B20 Summit Indonesia. Sudah ada rekan saya Alia Bunga di sana. Halo, selamat siang Alia.
Halo, selamat siang Melisa.
Baik, Alia, kalau kita lihat tadi ya panel diskusi yang berlangsung, menurut Alia apa saja poin-poin menarik tadi yang sudah dibicarakan oleh berbagai narasumber, khususnya Jeff Bezos dan juga Elon Musk?
Baik, Melisa, terima kasih untuk pertanyaannya. Tadi kita sudah mendengarkan video tapping singkat dari Chairman Eksekutif Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Dan dari pemaparan Jeff, kita bisa mendengar bahwa perubahan cuaca ini merupakan salah satu tantangan utama ya secara global. Dan solusinya itu membutuhkan kerjasama antara pemerintah dan swasta, perusahaan pemerintahan dan swasta. Di situ supaya memungkinkan terjadinya pertumbuhan ekonomi yang lebih cepat begitu. Dan disinilah Amazon juga berpartisipasi dengan cara juga untuk membangun pembangkit listrik tenaga surya yang lebih ramah lingkungan begitu. Dan terkait soal CEO Tesla sekaligus CEO Twitter juga yang Elon Musk tadinya ingin hadir ke Bali tapi berhalang.
Baik, sepertinya ada sedikit kendala teknis di sana.
Ya.
Baik, Halo Alia, yes.
Baik.
Kita tersambung
Sudah,
kembali, boleh dilanjutkan, yes.
Iya, tadi Melisa di sebuah pemaparan video ketika Elon Musk muncul, Elon Musk memakai batik Indonesia. Tadi Melisa lihat juga ya,
Yes,
batik
yes.
Sumatera Sulawesi. Dan dalam pemaparannya itu kita bisa memahami bahwa menurut Elon, Twitter itu adalah sebuah medium, bukanlah media. Itu sesuatu yang sangat filosofis bagi saya mendengarnya. Dan terkait soal investasi Elon dan perusahaannya di Indonesia, yaitu tentang nikel, itu menurut Elon, Indonesia memiliki bahan yang tepat untuk memproduksi energi terbarukan, begitu menurut dia. Dan landasan luncur roket juga terkait SpaceX-nya juga cocok dibangun di garis ekuator. Begitu. Jadi kemungkinan ya siapa yang tahu dari B20 ini akan ada kerjasama luar angkasa antara Indonesia dengan Elon Musk dan SpaceX-nya. Begitu.
Baik, baik. Oke, untuk agenda atau panel diskusi selanjutnya, ini apa saja yang akan dibahas dan tema-tema yang diangkat seputar atau mengenai apa saja, Alia?
Baik, untuk saat ini kita masih di jam 12.33 waktu WITA. Nah, jadi panel diskusi selanjutnya yakni panel kalau tidak saya adalah 11, itu dimulai akan pukul jam 1, mohon maaf. Dan di sela-sela itu nantinya akan juga ada hadir video Anne Hathaway dengan sambutannya terkait transformasi ekonomi. Selain itu, nanti di sore harinya, Melisa dan teman kumparan, akan ada kehadiran dari Perdana Menteri Kanada, Justin Trudeau. Langsung.
Baik, terima kasih Alia untuk laporannya, dan teman kumparan saat ini yang ada di layar monitor atau di layar gadget teman kumparan semuanya, ini merupakan situasi terkini pertemuan antara Presiden Republik Indonesia Joko Widodo dan juga Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden, di mana memang diketahui pada malam tadi, pada Minggu malam, Joe Biden ini sudah mendarat atau tiba di Bali di Bandara Internasional Igusti Ngurah Rai, dan saat ini sedang terjadi pertemuan antara Presiden Joko Widodo dan juga Joe Biden. Ini merupakan H-1 atau 1 hari sebelum besok akan dilangsungkan KTT G20, di mana tentunya dihadiri oleh para kepala negara dari negara-negara anggota G20. Meski ada beberapa kepala negara yang tidak bisa hadir dan diwakilkan oleh baik Menteri Luar Negerinya maupun perwakilan dari negara tersebut, delegasi dari negara tersebut. Seperti Rusia dan juga Meksiko yang confirm kepala negaranya tidak akan hadir dan diwakilkan oleh Menteri Luar Negeri. Kita tentunya akan menyaksikan bagaimana gelaran KTT G20 ini menjadi acara puncak untuk KTT G20 di Indonesia, di mana nantinya ketika tahun ini Indonesia menjadi tuan rumah, di tahun berikutnya akan ada India yang menjadi tuan rumah. Kita simak bersama bagaimana pertemuan dari Joko Widodo dan juga Joe Biden.
It's great to see you again. This is a good friend. Happy to welcome you back in May at the White House. I want to thank you for your hospitality and your support of this G20. You've done a wonderful job. Indonesia is a lively, critical partner. It's two of the largest democracies in the world working with their system of international order and human rights. pursuing a better future. We finalized a new partnership through the Millennium Challenge Corporation to invest nearly $700 million in developing high-quality transportation infrastructure here in Indonesia.
Kita juga mendapatkan masukan yang lebih baik dalam menyetujui kemitraan baru melalui Challenge Corporation untuk investasi ke masyarakat di dalam
Ini dalam kedua
Tomorrow we'll unveil a transformative new partnership to support Indonesia's clean energy transition. And finally, we collaborate to protect our people, including improving our ability to fight infectious disease, the launch of the historic pandemic.
Untuk melindungi masyarakat kita, kemampuan kita dalam merantas penyakit menular dengan peluncuran
Mr. President, I look forward to discussing all of this with you today, and thank you again for your hospitality and all you've done. It's good to see you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. Please continue to close the door. Thank you.
Do you have any comment ahead of your meeting with President Xi, sir?
How are you feeling about the meeting with President Xi, sir?
Thank you.
Baik teman kumparan, itu tadi pertemuan antara Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden dan juga Presiden Republik Indonesia Joko Widodo yang berlangsung siang ini, di mana yang kita ketahui bahwa besok ini akan berlangsung acara puncak KTT G20 pada tanggal 15 sampai 16 November 2022. Dan kedatangan dari kepala negara-negara anggota G20 ini, tentunya pengamanan juga dilakukan di area Bali, khususnya di area Nusa Dua dan juga di Hotel Apurva, nantinya akan menjadi tempat diselenggarakannya KTT G20 ini. Tentunya dilakukan pengamanan yang ada, dan seperti apa pengamanan yang dilakukan, kemudian bagaimana suasana di sekitar Bali jelang acara puncak KTT G20 ini, kita saksikan bersama liputan berikut ini.
Di sekitar pusat kegiatan konferensi tingkat tinggi G20 di ITDC Nusa Dua, Bali. Pengamanan tampak ketat, kendaraan tanpa stiker G20 dilarang masuk ke kawasan tersebut. Sejumlah petugas berjaga di jalur utama menuju ITDC. Diketahui dalam perhelatan besar ini, TNI dan Polri sebelumnya telah melakukan latihan gabungan terkait pengamanan tamu VVIP yang akan menghadiri KTT G20. Terdapat 42 serangkaian kegiatan pengamanan, mulai dari penyambutan hingga pengawalan para tamu. Selain itu, menjelang puncak perhelatan acara pada tanggal 15 hingga 16 November 2022, Korlantas Polri juga menerapkan skema ganjil genap dan pembatasan operasional angkutan barang.
Baik, Itu tadi sedikit seputar pengamanan atau situasi dan kondisi di daerah sekitar Nusa Dua, kemudian juga di Hotel Apurva yang nantinya akan menjadi tempat atau lokasi dari KTT G20 ini. Dan teman kumparan nantinya masih akan ada panel diskusi lagi di hari kedua B20 ini, dan tentunya kami juga masih akan melakukan live streaming untuk panel-panel diskusi yang ada. Namun kita akan kembali lagi ke pertemuan antara Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden dan juga Presiden Republik Indonesia Joko Widodo. Ini masih berlangsung, di mana tentunya juga dihadiri oleh delegasi atau pemerintah Amerika Serikat dan juga pemerintah Republik Indonesia. Ini merupakan suasana terkini yang ada di pertemuan antara Jokowi dan juga Biden. Yang kita ketahui juga adalah kepala negara dari negara-negara anggota G20 ini juga sudah mendarat dan tiba di Bali untuk menghadiri acara puncak G20 besok hari. Baik, kita lihat Joe Biden dan juga Presiden Republik Indonesia Joko Widodo berjabat tangan untuk mendokumentasikan pertemuan yang terjadi siang ini.
Selamat datang di Bali, selamat datang di Indonesia. Saya sangat menghargai kehadiran Presiden Biden di KTT G20 dari Bali. Karena itu saat ini saya menyampaikan apresiasi atas kehadiran Presiden Biden, dan besok kita akan memulai melakukan KTT G20. Saya berharap KTT G20 dapat menghasilkan kerjasama yang konkret yang dapat membantu dunia dalam pemulihan ekonomi global.
It's great to see you again. This is a good friend. Happy to welcome you back in May at the White House. I want to thank you for your hospitality and support at this G20. Critical partner. It's two of the largest democracies in the world working with their own system and international order and full human rights. Together to pursue a better future. We finalized a new partnership through the Millennium Challenge Corporation to invest in
Baik, teman kumparan, pertemuan antara Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden dan juga Presiden Republik Indonesia Joko Widodo ini masih berlangsung, dan nantinya kami akan kembali lagi melakukan live streaming untuk panel diskusi selanjutnya yang ada di main hall atau venue B20 Summit Indonesia, di mana hari ini menjadi hari terakhir gelaran B20. Dan untuk acara puncak KTT G20 besok, kumparan juga akan melakukan live streaming untuk mengabarkan bagaimana jalannya acara puncak dari KTT G20 ini. Saya Melisa Lolindu dan tim yang bertugas pamit undur diri. Kita berjumpa kembali di live streaming selanjutnya. Dan teman kumparan masih bisa menyaksikan bagaimana jalannya pertemuan antara Biden dan juga Jokowi. Terima kasih dan sampai jumpa.
di bio Instagram @goldenlamya.
Nah, hingga kini ada berapa dan siapa saja kepala negara maupun delegasi yang sudah tiba di Bali?
Ya, sesuai informasi terkini memang sudah ada sekitar 17 kepala negara yang mengkonfirmasi kehadirannya di konferensi tingkat tinggi KTT G20 ini, termasuk Presiden Amerika Serikat Joe Biden yang sudah sampai di Bali tadi malam sekitar pukul 21.50 waktu Indonesia Tengah di Bandara Igusti